Ladies and gents, boys and girls, Monday, September the 11th, 2023. Welcome. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. And yes, in case you are just realizing it is not by mistake, we have made the decision. Guys, I made the decision a couple months ago to take the Daily Crow and place it specifically on YouTube, because I felt like, honestly, that was the superior platform, if you will, and also the only platform that we were able to monetize, right? Help to grow the business in different ways. What I've realized over the last couple of months, that unless YouTube is going to become the platform that, is our main platform or supports TSUS the most, if you will, the platform that TSUS stands upon, I shall say. Unless we are going to do that, there is no reason to limit the exposure, limit the crowd, if you will, limit the audience. That's the word I was looking for. There's no reason to do that. So I figure, why not? Let's broaden this thing out. Let's put this out. So in case you are just now realizing it, yes, we are indeed streaming TDC, not just to YouTube anymore. Facebook and Twitter as well is where you can catch the Daily Crow every single day. Of course, also on YouTube, and I highly encourage you to tune in there because of the I will say it's still the superior platform. Either way, though, many of you that are on Facebook, that have been on Facebook, that have tuned into our show, welcome back. I think some of you probably went on a hiatus, at least from commenting, if you will, just because of the fact that some folks don't have a YouTube account. Again, those who are on Twitter as well, welcome to TDC. Welcome to the Daily Crow. I see Justin Langford, Ryan Miller, Jeremy Wardell, Nathan, Brendan M., Yoda, John Edward, GA, Wilcor, Mantis. What's going on? Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel. The TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there. Guys, again, we have a jam-packed show, lot to get into here on this Monday, September the 11th. And guys, before we go any further, let's stop and remember what happened on this fateful day 22 years ago in New York City with the Twin Towers. Keep those in your prayers. The family's obviously still affected by that. Again, let us never forget the events that took place and how it brought us closer together as a country. And also, yes, remember those who passed away on September the 11th, 2001. Crazy to think, man, it's been 22 years. And I recall where I was in elementary school at the time, but I'll never forget getting out early, going home, watching the news with my parents or what have you. And while I was a youngster, I think we were all obviously impacted by that. We felt the effects. So definitely remember that on this fateful day, September the 11th, 22 years now it has been since the tragedy that took place at the Twin Towers. Guys, but again, we keep it moving. We keep it rolling here on this Victory Monday, as we got a lot to get into, as I mentioned, guys. Hour number 3, our Q&A Power Hour. We're taking your questions, your comments, your calls, 843-790-3377. Let me also say, guys, thank you all so much to those of you who tuned in and made the A1 Air Quality Consultants post-game call-in show such a massive success after South Carolina's victory over Furman. We will be doing that, of course, yet again this weekend after the Georgia game and after every single Gamecocks football game this season. I would expect that post-game call-in show this weekend to air, I say start time around 7 o'clock. It'll be within 10 minutes following the conclusion of Carolina's game between the hedges, and we'll take your questions, your comments, and of course, your calls following that contest in every game this season. Hour number 2, we've got my good friend Chris Doering, who joins the show every single Monday. Chris Doering of SEC Network, a lot of great stuff for him. And of course, guys, hour number 1, we have got tons to discuss from a jam-packed weekend of SEC football. Like I mentioned, guys, in case you missed it, no, this is not a mistake. This is not a mistake. TDC is now live once again on Twitter and Facebook as well. So if you prefer to tune in on X, I say Twitter. It's now X, right? It's no longer the Bird app. If you'd like to tune in on X, if you want to tune in on Facebook, wherever you are, guys, I just appreciate you being here, being a part of this. So whatever platform you prefer, you can tune in on that platform. And guys, do not forget the Q&A Power Hour. Leave your comments, your questions, everything. If you cannot get a call in hour number 3, you want to be a part of the show, leave us a voicemail right now and or shoot us a text, and we will get to that in the third hour. But with that being said, guys, well, I want to play a game we like to call Monday Morning Quarterback as we look back on the weekend that was in college football, and most notably the SEC. And before we dive into any specific games, guys, week 2 of conference play has us scratching our heads wondering, what is wrong with the SEC? This is as poor a start to the season as the conference has had in, dare I say, recent memory. When you look at the way the conference has performed against Power 5 opponents, most notably the ACC, when you look at the way the conference is performing against quote-unquote lesser opponents, struggling out of the gate, struggling throughout the game, some quarterbacks not living up to their potential. You know, many, I think, will look across the league and try to poke holes in certain teams and say they're no good and this team stinks and see that team was overrated. Guys, I think a lot of this has to do with the increased parity in college football. And we have the transfer portal and NIL to thank for it. Now, I'm not saying that's the case in every single one of these scenarios. Certainly, there are some teams that have gone through 2 weeks of play that you look at and say, okay, this team has maybe more question marks than we realize, or they've got some real issues they're going to have to solve as we get into SEC play. But I just think the increased parity across the sport, right? More good players are going to more teams. Like a team like Texas, a team like Alabama, a team like Georgia, teams like LSU, while they still have most of the good players, they don't have all of them anymore. Like, there's not this monopoly, especially you look at Alabama, and we'll transition and talking about that game here in a second, but they no longer have a monopoly on all of the really good players. Like, there are really good players now at a lot of these smaller schools. A lot of these smaller schools are now pretty decent teams. And again, I'm not saying that applies to every single scenario and that some teams out there just don't look downright terrible to this point. But I think we're going to see more of this. Like, I think this is only the beginning. And it's a threat to the SEC, no doubt, because the SEC, you know, every time the SEC wins one of those, you know, SEC Big 12 matchups, or certainly SEC, ACC, or whatever it is, right? The cross-conference Power 5 matchups, if you will, the SEC sticking its chest out, beating its chest, look how great we are. And now, the reality is you have to look at it and say, what's the SEC's best win through the first 2 weeks of the college football season? Is it Ole Miss beating Tulane? Is it Auburn beating Cal? What is the best win? Because in all of the headliner matchups, the SEC has fallen flat out. The SEC has failed to perform at the highest level. That being said, guys, let's go ahead and dive into the slate. I want to start with the big one, Alabama and Texas. This was a game that admittedly, guys, I was watching South Carolina Furman in the Big Cock Club Discord, which, by the way, joined the BCC today. We had a blast in the Discord on Saturday night, but I was watching that game in the Discord on my MacBook, and on the big screen behind it, I did have this Alabama-Texas game. And guys, it was so much fun because I tell you, the first thing that jumped out to me, when you watch a game like that, the sound of that ball game, it's different. The popping of the pads, the physicality, you could just tell, right? It's a different type of sound, right? Like, you hear this all the time in baseball. Like, there's a difference between guys that are in the minor leagues and the way that the ball sounds off their wood bat and a guy like Ronald Acuna, right? Like when that ball jumps off of his bat, the crack of the bat is just different. It's just different. When you have two teams like Bama and Texas squaring off, the sound of the pads popping is just different, man. The type of grown men in the trenches is different. Either way, though, of course, Texas wins this game 34-24. And guys, like I told you last week, I picked Texas. I not only had Texas +7, but I hammered Texas in our pick'em going into the weekend. And I was chastised by many. No way, Texas goes into Alabama and they get this dub. And I'll say the same thing about Bama that I said about LSU after week 1 and they lost to Florida State. Everything Bama wants to achieve is out in front of it. Bama's season's not over, although I'm sure Crimson Tide faithful, they feel that way today because they're not used to losing, and they're certainly not used to losing at home. By the way, shout out, the last time Bama lost by double digits at Bryant-Denny Stadium, 2004. The Gamecocks, Savell Newton led, went in there and really beat up on Mike Shula's Crimson Tide. Either way, though, we knew over the offseason that Alabama had issues, right? Quarterback was a big question. Lost Will Anderson, lost Jahmyr Gibbs. Offensive line wasn't very good last year. And so that's why coming in this game, guys, like, Alabama looked great against Middle Tennessee State. Getting carried away with that type of result, good or bad, was a mistake. It was. And that's why, guys, admittedly, I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in a lot of these cupcake games that we're seeing at this point. Because if teams do good things, you discredit it because of the level of competition. If they do bad things, kind of the same thing, right? It's almost a lose-lose scenario. And going into this game, I still had questions about Jalen Milroe. I still had questions about Alabama on the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. And those things reared their ugly head. I mean, Jalen Milroe, I don't think he was terrible, right? The official stats, 14-27, 255, had 2 touchdowns, but 2 really costly interceptions as well. For a team that preached and proclaimed they were going to play joyless murder ball and bully ball this season, didn't see a whole lot of that on Saturday night. The leading rusher for Alabama, Jace McClellan, 12 for 45, 3.8 yards per carry. Jalen Milroe was the second leading rusher, 15 for 44. You're just not seeing Alabama get that same push that they've always gotten. And like I said, guys, they just don't have a monopoly on these great trench players like they once did. Defensive line couldn't get a single sack on Quinn Ewers, Texas quarterback, who was fantastic, by the way, in that ball game. I think we're spending a lot of time, at least some folks are, proclaiming that Alabama's season is over. The dynasty is dead. They are no longer what they used to be. We really need to spend time tipping the cap to Texas because they're legit. They're for real. I know we get sick of the whole Texas is back. And, they may fumble down the stretch, lose one they're not supposed to, or lose a couple. Who knows? But that Texas team, I mean, guys, you go down the list. I don't know that there's one position on that field that Alabama was better than Texas at. I mean, Texas has dudes. They've got certified dudes all over the field, and it showed. They're big and physical in the interior defensive front. They've got great linebacker play. They went step for step with Bama's wide receivers. I mean, their wide receivers led by Xavier Worthy are fantastic. They've got great tight ends. And again, Quinn Ewers is a big, big-time quarterback. I don't think Bama's season is over. I think Bama can still accomplish everything they want to accomplish, but this is a gut check game for them. And again, it'd be much more, I think, detrimental to Alabama. Let's say LSU, they won their season opener against Florida State and other SEC teams. Texas A&M had beat Miami. God forbid, we're going to talk about that in a second. But had those things happened, if the SEC as a whole looked better, then I think this loss would be more detrimental. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, the SEC just looks wide open right now. Looks wide open, and that bodes well for an Alabama team that's still trying to figure it out. So I wonder what Bama does at quarterback, because they've got a lot of other things to get shored up, right? Getting to this joyless murder ball that they talked about all offseason, but you guys know it starts and ends with the quarterback. And I just wonder, is Jalen Milroe going to be the guy moving forward? Do they have someone else on that roster they feel like can come in and get the job done? Guys, I just mentioned the Texas A&M Aggies, and I'm so mad at myself, man. I'm so mad at myself for drinking the Kool-Aid again and believing in Jimbo Fisher for even a second. And I will not make that mistake again. This game to me, and you know what? Give Miami credit. They're for real. They're legit. Mario Cristobal is doing a fantastic job. Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback's a great player. That being said, though, this was the game to me. I thought that if Texas A&M, if they're going to pop off and have that 10-win season, that breakout season that Jimbo Fisher and company they desperately need, like, I thought this was the game that needed to be the launching point. And Texas A&M, they come out of the gate, they start fast, right? A couple of special teams plays, what have you, and they just run into a brick wall. Turnovers, sloppy play, just mistake after mistake. And it wasn't the offense for the most part, right? They scored 38 points. Connor Wegman, he wasn't perfect, but he threw the ball 53 times. That was a major problem, right? They couldn't run the football. Connor Wegman was their leading ball carrier in terms of average, right? 5.8 yards per carry. The Daniels kid at 18 for 62, 3.4 yards per carry. Could not run the ball effectively. Defensively couldn't stop a nosebleed. And the stat that stands out to me, guys, Texas A&M, get this, they are 1-7. 1-7 in their last 8 games against Power 5 competition. 1-7 in their last 8. It's a non-conference game. I almost feel hypocritical saying that, for Texas A&M, this is detrimental, this is terrible, but for teams like Bama and LSU that can bounce back, it's just like it's another big game in which Jimbo Fisher falters. It's another big game. They fall flat on their face. And I don't know what it's going to take to turn it around for them. I really don't. And it's just becoming far too common a theme, if you will, right? We were all, I think we all wanted to believe in Texas A&M because of the recruiting and the wealth of talent they have. Like, guys, you look at their recruiting rankings, like they have, I'll say it's a notch below, because I think to say they have Georgia-level talent on the defensive front is probably a little too aggressive, but like it's just one step behind. That's how well they've recruited. On paper, but they're paper tigers. That's what Texas A&M is. They are paper tigers. They've recruited at a high level. If you gave me like just showed me recruiting rankings, I'd tell you Texas A&M or that team, that bio, that profile, that's a team that's going to win their division, win the SEC West. I'd say, well, that's Bama, that's Georgia. Who is that? It's Texas A&M. And so something's missing. If you have the talent and you have all the resources that A&M has, what are you missing? I think the answer is pretty obvious. So depending on how this season goes, I think it's too early to start saying fire Jimbo right now and start talking about his buyout. But if this continues and they're a fringe 500 team or, scratching and clawing to get to 7 wins, I think you really have to take a step back. If you're Aggie Nation, if you're the 12th man, you take a step back and say, what are we doing? Because you've got the money in College Station to basically go get anybody. Like, if you find the right guy, that thing's going to work. I'm just not sold right now that Jimbo's the right guy. Guys, as I mentioned, I think at this point, maybe the most impressive win by an SEC team thus far, Ole Miss went on the road to Tulane, took down the Green Wave 37-20, a gutsy win for Lane Kiffin's squad, outscored Tulane 27-3 in that second half. Surprising it was that close, honestly, just because starting quarterback for Tulane was out in that ball game. Jackson Dart, I thought he had said after the game they expected a fight, they expected a battle. 17-27, 267, 2 touchdowns and a pick in that one. Was surprised the lack of success in the running game for Ole Miss. 18 for 48, 2.7 yards per carry, a touchdown in the game. But, I think the bottom line of that, by the way, they couldn't stop the run either. 23 for 92 for Hughes, the leading ball carrier for Tulane. Either way, though, guys, it's a gutsy win. It's a gritty win. By the way, Trigg continues to be a big-time player for them. Wade on the outside, Watkins, Harris. They've got all kinds of weapons at Ole Miss for sure, and you expect the offensive attack to be a strong point for them. Shout out to Pete Golding and his defense in the second. Really, really clamping down there. Like I mentioned, outscoring them 27-3. And, you go on the road. It's a small venue, small environment, 40,000 seat stadium, but still like a tough environment, tough road game. I think that's a high quality win. Top 25 win, by the way. Tulane was ranked 24th in the country. I was impressed with Ole Miss. I really was. And I think Ole Miss is just kind of, in an SEC West that LSU loses, Alabama loses. I'm not saying a team like Ole Miss or Arkansas is going to win the West, but I think there's some really, really good teams in the West beyond just those top 2 or top 3 that we talked about all offseason. So I think the West is going to be a ton of fun, man. I think it's going to be a ton of 50-50 games, ton of toss-ups, and I think Ole Miss absolutely will have something to say about that. Guys, the best of the rest, you look across it, really disappointed with Vandy, man. Really disappointed. Maybe we were sold a bag of goods that Vandy could not deliver on over the course of the offseason. They win 5 games last year. 2 SEC wins. They beat Kentucky, to beat Florida. And, we all thought to ourselves that Vandy maybe could get to 6 wins. It's not the fact they lost, right? Because Wake Forest at their place, good program, but they've looked terrible. I mean, over the first 2 weeks, or for them 3 weeks, with week 0 being included. And I know some folks out there, right, we'll drop our SEC power rankings tomorrow, and some folks will say, Florida's criminally high. Why are they ahead of Vandy? Guys, Vandy has looked terrible. They've looked awful. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. Started that game out, it was 24-14 after half. They get outscored 12-6 in the second half. A.J. Swan in the ballgame, 26-39, 314, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. I mean, they're basically a 3-man show, pretty much. They're pretty much a 3-man show. They've got A.J. Swan. They've got Will Shepherd, who's a beast, by the way, at wide receiver. He had 8 catches for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they've got Jaden McGowan on the outside as well. Outside of that, guys, and I actually thought, too, the rushing attack from the, Smith and Alexander, those kids, 10 for 77. The leading rusher, 10 for 28 for Alexander. So the running game was solid, but defensively, they've got major, major issues in the secondary. They could not stop Claiborne on the ground, 26 for 165. And then Carney as well, 13 for 117. So they really had a 1-2 punch in that ball game. And so Vandy's a team, I think, they've got UNLV this weekend. We'll talk more about those games later in the week, of course. But, could they still get to that 6-win mark? Sure. But I think right now the question more so for Vandy is, do they hit the over-win total? That's the big question for them. Georgia beats Ball State 45-3, guys. Won't spend too much time on some of these lesser games, if you will. I'm not buying. We'll talk more about Georgia. Obviously, Gamecocks traveling between the hedges this week. I'm not buying the whole Georgia stinks. They're not very good. Look at the slow starts. Yes, they've started out slow, guys. They also dropped a 31 spot in the second quarter against Ball State. As I said last week, guys, dogs love to play with their food. I think a lot of these SEC teams are doing that. You're just going to have a hard time convincing me to draw conclusions from games in which fan bases are half fired up, teams are half fired up, it's watered down game plans. I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in it. And with all that being said, Georgia still won this freaking ball game 45-3. Kentucky's the really interesting one. They beat Eastern Kentucky 28-17. And many folks are out there. Kentucky's overrated. They stink. We tried to tell you, Chris, they're no good. And I will say they've been disappointing, right? And give credit, though. Devin Leary, I thought, came alive in that ball game. You look at the stats, 24 for 38, 299, 4 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception, but 4 touchdown passes in that football game. Ray Davis looks as good as advertised, 12 for 52, 4.3 yards per carry, but they were throwing the football up and down the field. And I'll just say this. Our friend Nick Roush of KSR, Kentucky Sports Radio, he pointed out something that I think was very provided a lot of context. Mark Stoops, they've been bad against these FCS teams. I think his record against the spread is like 4-6 in those games. And you look back to the past couple of years when Kentucky was winning 9 or 10 games, like they struggled against Youngstown State. They struggled against some of these smaller teams. So again, I would just caution people from drawing any sort of conclusions. I'm not telling you that Kentucky's been impressive because they haven't. They've been downright bad. They've been sloppy. It's been ugly. I'm excited, though, as we get into SEC play to start to learn more about these football teams. Same thing with Arkansas and Kent State, guys. I mean, a final score of 28-6, not going to blow anybody away. The score was 14-6 at halftime, and this is kind of a slow, grinded out ball game by Arkansas. Scored 7 in the third, 7 in the fourth. KJ Jefferson, guys, 13-19, 136, 2 touchdowns. You got to think about this too, guys. And also KJ, 13 for 48. Rocket Sanders, I'm not even seeing him on the rushing stats. I'm not sure if he even played in this game. Anyways, though, you got to think, too. Like, we watched South Carolina against Furman, right? We'll get to that game here in just a second. But we watched the Gamecocks against Furman. It's a lot of it's empty the bench. Let's play other guys. Let's get our youngsters experience. So, I think folks can get lost in these scores, get lost in these stats. We're really not going to start learning things until this weekend when SEC play begins. Tennessee, like, what was that about, right? With that being said, what was that about? I mean, at one point, guys, Austin, PA is up 6-3 on the Volunteers, and this was a 13-6 game with Tennessee leading at half, 30-13 the final. This is not what we are used to seeing from Josh Heupel's teams, who typically start fast. They put their foot on your throat, and they score 50 points, what have you. Also, by the way, I think we learned that Virginia team they beat in week 1 was not very good, right? James Madison went and took down UVA. So I don't know how much stock we can put in that. Joe Milton, 21-33, 228, 2 touchdowns, no picks. A solid outing. I think we'll learn a lot more this weekend about him in the Swamp when they take on the Gators. Their fantastic running game that they lean on. Jalen Wright leading the way for Tennessee, 13 for 118, 9.1 yards per carry in that game. Small went 13-95. But again, just a sloppy game. A sloppy game for Tennessee, coming out the gate really slow. I mean, there's a reason. Listen, football's 4 quarters. We know that as Gamecock fans watching the games and watching against lesser opponents, if you will. But I was really surprised at the slow start. LSU bounces back in a big way, 72-10. They take down Grambling. I mean, I think it was the response you needed. Same thing for Florida McNeese, 49-7. Gators win. They get back on the right side of things. Missouri, I mean, another team almost losing to Middle Tennessee State. What is going on, right? Brady did not cook on Saturday night in Como. I mean, escaping death against a Middle Tennessee State team that got blasted by Alabama just last week. Brady Cook, 14-19, 204, did have 2 touchdowns, no picks in the game. I don't know what Eli Drinkwitz is doing here, though. I mean, you look at the second half, some questionable play calling, some questionable decision-making, if you will. I mean, this game, guys, 10-10, or, mid-third quarter, if you will. And this is one that Mizzou, you thought they had control early on and just never could pull away. So, I don't know what to think of Mizzou either, really. Mississippi State, Arizona. I thought this was low-key one of the better wins of the weekend, a game that went to overtime. The biggest thing I take away from this, guys, is Mississippi State fans and SEC fans as a whole as well. We're going to have to get used to Mississippi State just not being as fun and as flashy as they were, right? A weird game, by the way, at Starkville. Mississippi State Arizona had 4 turnovers in their first 4 possessions in this football game. But, I mean, guys, when's the last time Will Rogers passing stats? 13 of 17 for 162 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, they have completely gone away. This Kevin Barbay offense, they've gone completely away from the air raid, if you will. Completely gone away from it. You look at the running game. I mean, Mississippi State guys, they are getting back to like the old school State physicality, right? Nasty on both lines of scrimmage. Jarquavius Marks, 24 for 123, a touchdown in the ball game. Their backup running back, Davis, 5 for 34. But they are running the football, right? Like, they are committing to running the football, right? I mean, how about Arizona? McMillan, their wide receiver, 8 for 161 and a touchdown, average 20.1 yards per reception. Griffin for State, I think one of the best playmakers in the SEC, most underrated for sure, 5 for 83. He had 2 touchdowns in the ball game. But that was just, guys, I think for so early in the Zach Arnett era, a huge win for him, moved to 2-0. And now Mississippi State really has their first test, right? At home, LSU coming to town. You might recall this was a game. We'll talk about it more later in the week, but this was a game over the course of the offseason I picked as an upset. I had State beating LSU. We'll lock in picks later this week, but do not be surprised if some weird things happen in Starkville with the ghost of the Pirate looming over throughout this season. Finally, guys, Auburn and Cal. Auburn gets the dub, 14-10, a really sloppy game. Listen, if you're Hugh Freeze, throw out that tape of the offense, right? Because it was ugly. It was abysmal. The fact of the matter is this, though. You got the win, right? A road win on the West Coast. You've got Samford now upcoming, should be 3-0. All of a sudden, don't sleep on the Freeze. Don't sleep on Auburn. Here they come. Here comes Hugh Freeze and those Auburn Tigers. That was a good win. That was a good win in week 2, man. I had Cal, admittedly, straight up, you guys know. And, I expected a lot more points. I think we all did, but that's a good win for so early on. I mean, guys, we recall what Shane Beamer did in year 1, his second game. He went on the road to East Carolina. Granted, not the type of opponent Cal is, but either way, goes on the road week 2, guts out a really tough win, gets the W, and that set them up for success in year 1. I could see this doing the same thing because Cal, they're not a great team by any means, but it's a Power 5 opponent. And there's a lot of SEC teams out there right now that wish they could say they had a win over a Power 5 opponent. So a good win for Auburn, Hugh Freeze. I think if they were going to hit the 7 or 8 win mark, overachieving year 1, this was one they most likely needed to have. A lot to clean up, a lot to shore up. But hey, the bottom line is this: win, baby, win. Win anyways, find a way. And Auburn did that, 14-10 over Cal. So all in all, a rough first 2 weeks for the SEC when you factor in some of the headliner games. And it should be a lot of fun, guys, as we, for the most part, put out-of-conference play behind us and SEC play officially gets underway going into week 3. Guys, that being said, let's jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, I'm going to give you my top takeaways from South Carolina's 47-21 win over the Furman Paladins on Saturday night. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home. Call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, I'm back here on this Monday, September the 11th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. I do want to take a moment to shout out all of our folks on Facebook that I have not seen or heard from in a while. I saw somebody like Coleman Hall jumping in. Coleman, I appreciate you, man. It's great to have you back in the fold. And some of you, I'm sure, were already, we're still tuning in, but maybe weren't commenting quite as much or what have you. And like I said, guys, earlier, top of the show, in case you missed it, we have open the show back up to Twitter and Facebook along with YouTube as well. Simply did it, guys, just because I felt like, while I do believe that YouTube is the superior platform and the best platform for TDC to air on, why limit where people can watch the show, how they can consume it, what have you. So again, guys, just wanted to open it back up and glad to have you guys and great to chat with you all and get your questions. Again, whether you're on X, you're on Facebook, or you're on YouTube. So again, thank you all so much. Guys, that being said, we're going to keep the conversation rolling here on this Monday as I'm talking Gamecocks and Furman. South Carolina is officially in the win column. It is Victory Monday as the Gamecocks took down the Paladins by a final score of 47-21 at Williams-Brice Stadium. My top takeaways. I know last week, guys, we did top 5 takeaways, but I feel like it's much better, right? What you can expect every Monday. Instead of top 5 takeaways, I mean, listen, there's going to be some games I have 3 or 4 takeaways. There's going to be some games that I have 10 takeaways. So why put a number limit on it? My top takeaways from South Carolina's 47-21 win over the Furman Paladins. Guys, the Gamecocks are officially in the win column on the 2023 season, and it is officially Victory Monday because of it. My biggest takeaway from that game, and the thing that stood out to me more than anything, how many conclusions can you draw? What can you really take away, right, from a victory over an FCS foe? Granted, not your typical FCS foe. Let's not forget, we spent all of last week talking about how good Furman is and the challenges they present to South Carolina, right? But watching the stars of tomorrow make their impact today, folks, the future is bright in Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, it really is. And that, to me, was the greatest takeaway of all. When you look back at this game, the 47-21 victory, guys like Lenoris Sellers at quarterback, Nick Harbor at wide receiver, Trovon Bowe and Oluwatosin Babalade, on the offensive line, Tyshawn Russell at wide receiver, Dontavius Braswell at running back, Xavier McLeod up front on the defensive side, Pup Howard at linebacker, Jelon Kilgore, the secondary. The list goes on and on. And I know for some people that maybe the turnaround of South Carolina's program under Shane Beamer, it has not happened with the quickness that they would prefer, especially when you look across college football and see some of these other teams having success so early in their head coaches' tenures, if you will. But I think Saturday night was a great representation that this thing is being built. This thing is being built in the right way, right? Through recruiting, through the high school ranks, and you got a glimpse of that on Saturday night. I mean, how could you leave that game not being giddy by what we saw from Lenoris Sellers, right? Like, I'm not one, I feel like as Gamecock fans, we should have learned our lessons by now, right? About anointing somebody the next guy. He's the second coming. Like, guys, we did it with Brandon McElwain. We did it with Connor Mitch. We did it with Ryan Helinski. We did it with Jake Bentley. Like, this has happened before. So I'm not ready to sit here and say that Lenoris Sellers is going to win the Heisman or win the SEC or win the national title. But, like, there are some things you look at and you cannot help but be excited about, right? Like that long touchdown pass down the sideline, the way Lenoris Sellers slings the football, the velocity, right? The way it comes out of his hand, obviously the physicality, his overall build, his speed, what have you. It was a lot of fun to watch. And after a spring in which, he flashed in the spring game, and, I'd had folks that were there that told me, they said, Chris, the way that stadium lit up when Lenoris Sellers winning that football game, and it's one of those things, guys, I'll never forget when Stephen Garcia was a true freshman at South Carolina and early in his tenure, right? Like, different quarterbacks would play, obviously, under Steve Spurrier, but when Stephen Garcia came in, the energy was just different, right? It was just the way the crowd perked up, the way the team got amped up and energized. And I think you could argue you see that with Lenoris Sellers, right? Like, with all due respect to all of the guys on campus and all the guys that are coming in to battle for that quarterback spot, there's just a different vibe around Lenoris Sellers, right? And I'm not trying to, like I mentioned, crown the guy too early or what have you, but similar to the way that Stephen Garcia provided a spark in those early Spurrier years, and he's inserted in the game, and you could just feel the energy completely shift. And a lot of it because of what he was able to do on the field with his dynamic playmaking ability and his great arm. Like, I see a lot of that in Lenoris Sellers. Like, I see a guy that when he's inserted in the game, his teammates rally around him, the great energy and the excitement. And it's just that spark that maybe other guys on the roster just do not present. So the future is very bright under center. And I know it's one game, and I understand that, we're not going to draw conclusions from Furman. But, guys, at this point, I don't know how Lenoris Sellers – it's going to be an open competition, no doubt. But I don't see how Lenoris Sellers isn't South Carolina's QB1 leaving spring ball next year. Like, I just don't see it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see how it's even possible at this point. With all due respect to guys like Luke Doty and Tanner Bailey and Colton Gauthier and even Dante Reno coming in, if all goes according to plan, Lenoris Sellers is the guy, right? Lenoris Sellers, the dude. I think he showed glimpses of that on Saturday night, guys. Of course, Nick Harbor finally getting some action, the touchdown catch. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Lenoris Sellers and Nick Harbor throughout the next couple of years, if you will. And I know folks kept asking, Chris, where is Nick Harbor? Why is he not out there? Well, you have to guess no longer, because there he was. And a great catch, by the way. His first ever target, his first ever catch in college. It goes for a touchdown. Only fitting, right? You had the youth movement on the offensive front. I thought I thought Babalade, I thought Jatavius Shivers. I thought they were really good guys. These guys were 3 of your top 4 graded offensive linemen in that game. You know, Tyshawn Russell, who caught the deep pass from Lenoris Sellers, the great speed and athleticism. He looked really good. I thought Dontavius Braswell at running back. Again, guys, we're going to talk about a lot more of these in depth as we go. Xavier McLeod making that interception, if you will, defensive tackle spot. Pup Howard flying all over the field. It's just really exciting. And you look back at last year, guys, too. In the last couple of years, like, for whatever reason, South Carolina has not played their youngsters like this. And I think this was by design. I think this was on purpose. I know that many of us, including yours truly, we had questions about, okay, why is Spencer Rattler getting pulled middle of the third quarter when, you know, the margin's only 20? And you say, well, it's 20. I mean, listen, one score and that game gets uncomfortably close, right? So I was surprised that Spencer Rattler was pulled. But listen, when you have guys like, you know, Dylan Stewart on campus and some other big-time defensive line prospects or other big-time prospects, 5-star guys that are, you know, seeing your stadium and your environment and your play for the first time, some of them at least, you know, the fact that you can sell that, hey, you're going to come in as a true freshman and you're not just going to sit and rot on the bench. Like, you're going to play. Right. This is a luxury that Clemson's had over the last couple of years, that Georgia's had, that some of these other upper echelon teams have had. They've been able to empty their bench and play tons of different dudes. And guys, you can sell that in recruiting. You can absolutely do so. So I thought it was awesome to see, guys. And again, that was my biggest takeaway, is just seeing the stars of tomorrow. You know, the future is extremely bright, and really, really excited to see how Shane Beamer and company, they continue to build this thing through the high school ranks. You can see it, guys. You can see the talent improving slowly but surely in Columbia. Now, the rest of the game and everything else that really is going to impact, I think, this season, because while all those youngsters are great, not sure exactly how much they're going to play in SEC play and impact this season. Offensively, you got to start with QB1. I mean, Spencer Rattler, what he did on Saturday night, and I know it was Furman, don't get me wrong, but 25 of 27, 345, and 3 touchdowns, that's a hell of an outing. I don't care who you're playing. But the thing, guys, you know, like I mentioned last week this time, talking about the UNC game, and the stats were flashy, and that was great and everything, but for me, it was a take beyond just what the numbers told you. I feel the exact same way this week. Like, those numbers are awesome. I mean, that level of efficiency, the passing yards, the passing touchdowns, like, it's really nice to see Spencer Rattler be able to put up some numbers, right, in a game like this. We didn't see that last year. The thing that I leave that Furman game with, though, and listen, I don't know how he's going to play against Georgia. I don't know what he's going to be like in SEC play or throughout the year. And listen, this is football. He's going to make mistakes. I get it. But guys, it is so night and day, the fact that Spencer Rattler is just so much more comfortable than he was last year. I mean, the reason he's able to operate at a high level, guys, and make plays and go downfield and put up these numbers is he's not trying to process a million different thoughts at the line of scrimmage. I mean, it's just that simple. Like, I'm not saying, again, that it's perfect. I'm not saying South Carolina isn't going to have days they're going to struggle offensively, because they absolutely are. There's no question. They are. But Spencer Rattler, the comfortability level of him in this offense, the way he's operating right now, guys, it's night and day different from last year. And I think that once you get a player that has that type of skill level, that type of talent, and he's able to feel comfortable in the system and just go out there and play, right? Less thinking, more playing. He's able to go out there, be confident in the game plan, be confident, of course, in his abilities, but not have to move half speed or 3/4 speed because he's trying to process certain things. Okay, I got to remember this. I got to do this. I got to add that. He's just able to go out there and play. I think you're seeing that. I think that's why he's putting up these numbers. And again, it's not going to be perfect game after game after game, but it's going to give South Carolina the best possible chance to win. It's going to give them the best possible chance to have success in SEC play, even if there is no running game to lean on, because we'll talk about that in a second. Obviously, that was not there. But as I mentioned, guys, middle or late last week or what have you, a confident Spencer Rattler, that's a great place to start. And that's exactly what you have now going into SEC play. To the outside, guys, I mean, listen, Juice Wells, what's his status? I don't think he's 100%. I know Shane Beamer's been gamesmanship, and we all love Shane Beamer here, but I have just at this point learned to completely block out any and all injury reports that we hear throughout the week. Juice Wells, yes, he was on the field. Yes, he had a catch. Is he the Juice Wells that we all know and love? There's no way, guys. There's just no way. There's no way you're going to sit here and tell me that Juice Wells has fallen off to such a degree that he has, 2 catches? 1 catch early in the season? There's just no way. That being said, though, all due respect to Juice Wells, guys, I think Xavier Legette has this team's top weapon. I really do. I think Xavier Legette, I'll tell you this, I don't think it's a matter of when Juice Wells comes back fully healthy, he's just, okay, this is wide receiver 1 and Legette sliding back to wide receiver 2. I think it's 1A and 1B. Xavier Legette is on a different planet this season. And for a guy that, we talked about in the preseason, is he going to be able to finally break out and live up to the hype and live up to the expectations? Guys, he leads all of Power 5 in receiving yards right now. I mean, this dude is playing out of his mind. He's making 50-50 balls, turning into 70-30 balls in his favor. And it's a lot of fun to watch, man. It's a lot of fun to watch. We felt like for years Xavier Legette had this potential because of the build, big body nature, athletic kid, if you will. And I just go back to this. Last year's Texas A&M game, that kickoff return for a touchdown. My goodness, was that not the light bulb moment for Xavier Legette? Because since then, he's been a man on a mission. Before that, he was lost, right? He had that SC State game where ball went off his hands and it was picked off. And, many folks said, hey, this kid should never play again. Some people thought, hey, put him on the bench. Don't let him off until absolutely necessary. The way he has turned it around and has become South Carolina's top wide receiver, I mean, it's incredible to watch, man. And I think realistically now you look that this could be 1,000-yard receiver guy. Like, he really could. He's on a torrid pace right now, guys. Again, the most receiving yards through 2 games, I believe, in South Carolina history, right? Think of all the great receivers in the history of Gamecocks football. He's got more than any of them ever had through 2 games. So it's a lot of fun to watch, man. I can't wait to see what he does in SEC play. Sticking with the offense, guys, moving to the running back position. And I feel like this is somewhat of a no-brainer take because I think we knew that while DeCabrion Joyner was slotted at RB1, that this was an open competition, right? That South Carolina, it was going to be a work in progress until they really found out what they had back there in the backfield. And I don't put the blame, I am certainly not going on this show today and saying that, DeCabrion Joyner doesn't have what it takes to be a good running back. He needs more blocking, right? He needs better holes to run through. I think we'd all agree that, if the offensive line were to get fixed, DeCabrion Joyner's athleticism and athletic ability, it would take care of the rest of it, right? He is a good enough athlete to be productive back there. But I think getting looks at Dontavius Braswell and Mario Anderson, I think all of a sudden we have a different conversation here this week. I think this is a wide open competition, which you can look at one of 2 ways. You can look at it as a positive in the sense of, okay, there are more quality options maybe back there than we expected. You can also look at it as, man, you don't want more questions surfacing going into SEC play, especially when you're starting SEC play between the hedges. But I think you look specifically at what a Mario Anderson showed you. And here's the thing, guys. Did I have my doubts about Mario Anderson coming from D2 playing SEC ball? Absolutely. And just because he popped off 5 yards a carry against Furman, that doesn't mean that he's the answer at running back. But I will tell you what the advantage, that the leg up that Mario Anderson has on everybody else in the room. And the feedback we got after the game Saturday night was, Mario Anderson, he's running hard, like he runs with an edge. He runs pissed off. He looks like a big-time running back. Well, you know why that is, guys? Because despite the level, he's been a big-time running back. He's the only one in that room that can say that, outside of what some of them did at high school. But at the collegiate level, Dontavius Braswell's the only one that has produced at a high level. And so I think when you have that level of confidence, and I think for Dakereon Joyner, like the difference is, we talked about Spencer Rattler. I think Dakereon Joyner's still somewhat thinking, right? Processing, okay, this is what I do. This is how I hit the hole. This is how I play the position. Like Mario Anderson, no matter the level, he knows how to play running back. Like he knows the ins and outs of being a successful running back. And so I think for Mario Anderson, I think there's less thinking and I think there's more doing. The kid runs with an edge. He runs hard. He runs pissed off, right? Runs with a bad attitude. And I think a lot of that comes from the confidence of him saying, you know what? My game is good enough. Like I have been a big-time dude. I am a big-time dude. And so he runs with that chip on his shoulder. Well, I think maybe Dakereon Joyner is kind of, feeling it out, if you will. Now, I think Dakereon Joyner can still have a ton of positive impact on this offense. And by no means am I saying that I think they should use them all, right? I think they should give all of them a chance to operate, especially going to Georgia. You go through SEC play. Like, you just got to kind of see what you got, right? Like, roll the dice, roll them out there, see who gets hot. But I do think Mario Anderson's performance and the glimpses you saw, maybe it does give you a glimmer of hope that maybe there's an RB1 in there that could step up and be a dude and be productive for us on a week in, week out basis. Maybe there's a guy in there that could be a 100-yard rusher every now and then, right? So I think going into SEC play, I think there should be an open competition at running back. I really do. Guys, we talked about the running game. How about the offensive front? I'll just say this, guys, and I'm going to save a lot more of this commentary for later in my takeaways. 2.8 yards per carry, right? We were, all eyes were on the offensive line going in this game. And, let us not forget, it was ugly early, right? I mean, Furman's up 14-7. I know many of you and Willie B, me at home, social media, people were crapping themselves for lack of a better way to put it, right? Like people were on edge. This season's over. Burn it down. We're not going to win another game, right? Thankfully, the Gamecocks got it rolling. The line of scrimmage looked much, much better, guys, as we expected. I thought South Carolina wore down the Furman Paladins. I think South Carolina, based off what we saw Saturday night, should absolutely 110% consider an overall youth movement on the offensive line. Guys, just look at the numbers coming out of Furman. The offensive line grades came out on Sunday morning. 3 of the top 4 graded offensive linemen from Saturday night's game were true freshmen. Big Tree Babalade, Jatavius Shivers, and Trovon Bowe. And guys, you know what? All due respect, as much as I can give, to Sidney Fugar, Tyshawn Wanamaker, some of these other guys, right? Ja'Kai Moore, if you will. Like, all due respect, if the O-line's going to be shoddy anyways, and it's going to be held together by Scotch tape, I would much rather roll with the youngsters that, they may not be ready to play. They may not be ready to take on Georgia's defensive line or take on a defensive line in SEC play. They may not quite be there, but they will get there. They will get there. And I would rather take my licks with those guys up front and let them, get their battle scars, get their experience, get their reps, and South Carolina be better because of it in the long run. Because I don't need to see any more action. Sidney Fugar is terrible. Tyshawn Wanamaker, he is what he is. Ja'Kai Moore, same thing. Like, I don't need to see any more action. I don't need to watch 77 get his ass whipped by that Georgia defensive line. I don't need to see it. We know what's going to happen, right? And I'm not saying that these freshmen won't struggle. And you know what? Maybe you can't just totally ditch 77 and 55 and some of these other guys. Like, you have to have depth. Like, I understand, like, but I would so much rather watch South Carolina. Like, dude, you've got the quarterback in Lenore Sellers. You've got a fantastic young running back, I think, in Nontavious Braswell. You've got Nick Harbor. You've got some young receivers. You know tight end's going to be a strength for you. Like, dude, if you have the offensive line, you're going to be cooking. Like, you're going to be cooking in a couple of years. I'd rather South Carolina, hey, let's go with the youth movement. Let's start a freshman or two, maybe three. Heck, I don't know. It's not a recipe to win big in the SEC. I totally get that. And I'm not saying, like, let's just build for the future and focus on that. But, guys, I think these are the best available. I think that's what it comes down to. And so would you rather keep rolling out the veterans who have shown you what they are, or let the freshmen with extremely high upside and players that are, you know, the Great Wall of Carolina of the future, let them play anyways? Like, I'd much rather side with the youth movement up front. I thought you saw them do some really good things, especially in that second half. And, you know, I would roll with the youngsters. I know you can't just completely abandon the other guys that I was mentioning, but I'd roll with the youngsters. I'd give them every opportunity possible because, hey, guess what, guys? As long as you can weather the storm early in the first half of the season, you get to the second half, and guess what? These freshmen up front, they're not quite true freshmen anymore. They've played a lot of football. That'll set you up well in that final 4-game stretch at home at Willie B. It'll set you up well in road trips at Mizzou and A&M. I think it'll set you up well for the rest of this season and going into 2024 and beyond as well. Guys, to the defensive side, I think the defensive front is still a major concern. I do. You know, I thought you saw some much better things, right? You forced 3 sacks. You got some pressure. Early game struggles were very frustrating. I don't understand why Clayton White cannot make an adjustment before halftime. I just don't get it. And they were very good in the second half, by the way. Give credit, but, like, I don't get why it takes Clayton White that long. Like, why Clayton White has to be schooled by Furman for 30 minutes to get it going. I obviously like Clayton White, but that's one thing that always puzzles me. Yeah, I think the defensive front, you know, I think to J.C. Sherbert's point last week and my point last week as well, like, guys, it's just about these dudes playing better. You know, I think T.J. Sanders and Nick Barrett, I thought they looked really good in their limited action, especially T.J. Sanders getting after the quarterback. I thought Jordan Strawn was very active in the ball game, but it's about those guys up front just playing better. Like, what you got's what you got, right? Like, if that D-line is going to improve and be more of a force, Tonka Hemingway's just got to play better. Boogie Huntley's just got to play better. Jordan Strawn's just got to play better. And you got to keep your fingers crossed that you get Jatius Gear back quickly, right? Because I know Brian Thomas Jr. made some plays in that game, but I mentioned you guys last week. Like, he's not an SEC end, in my opinion. He's not an SEC edge. And so I think South Carolina, you know, they've still got issues on the defensive front. You know, we'll see how they're able to combat those. If some other guys step up, if an Elijah Davis can become more involved. But, you know, while it was better in the second half, I thought the physicality got better. I thought South Carolina was more active up front, and great adjustments by Clayton White and company. And guys just stepped up and started playing better. When you're getting pushed around by Furman early, I don't care if it's early, if it's late. I don't give a damn how long it is. When you're getting pushed around by Furman, that's a concern. That's a concern. Guys, I talked about the youth movement, the number of young guys that played on Saturday, sticking with the defense. I think Pup Howard, kid was flying around. You know, it's one of those things, again, he's drinking water over a fire hose, a young guy trying to learn. And, of course, you get into SEC play and you don't want to overload him. But I think Pup Howard at linebacker needs to see more playing time. This is a group, again, if the linebacker position, they're going to take a step forward, I think a guy like Pup Howard's got to limit his potential. I think he's got to be a dude for you. You no longer have Mo Kaba, obviously. You know, I think Stone Blanton is quicker. I think he's a bigger cat too. I think he's playing much better football, but you know, and Debo Williams obviously is we know what we're getting out of Debo Williams at this point, but I think you got to play Pup Howard, man. I think you got to play Pup Howard, play him often. I think he's one of your top players at the linebacker position. I want to see more out of him in helping that run defense for sure. Jelon Kilgore, guys, I moved to the secondary. He's a star in the making. I just, you know, led the team in tackles on Saturday night. Love watching Jelon Kilgore. You know, the Gamecocks, they've hung their hat on secondary. I think that'll continue based off some of the guys they've recruited and some of the guys that have filled in, if you will. But Kilgore, a guy, I think he's doing a fantastic job filling in for Nick Emenwari. We'll see what his status is this week, obviously. But, you love to see that from your young defensive backs. And Kilgore, I think, is a guy that, he's got big-time DB written all over him for sure. Final thing, guys, for me, as we put the Furman game, for the most part, behind us, and we look ahead of the start of SEC play. And this is not me being Debbie Downer. This is not me being negative. This is me being real with you and giving you perspective. Saturday night was a lot of fun. And one of my other takeaways, too, guys, is I think that's the game. If we could go back and I could somehow, if I had this power, I would have switched the Furman and North Carolina games, because I think with the amount of questions and the amount of young players that South Carolina has on their roster, right? I mean, look at Saturday night, guys. Look how many young guys were making contributions, or, some of those guys, those young guys, it's like they're better than a guy that's starting, it almost looks like. At least it looks like they have more talent, if you will. But I think for this football team that had so many questions, ideally, you would have had Furman week 1 and UNC week 2. Unfortunately, you didn't get that. And I think this is a team, while Saturday night was a lot of fun, beating up on Furman was great, this is still a football team with major issues and major concerns heading into SEC play. Look at what Appalachian State guys did in North Carolina. Guess how many sacks UNC had against Appalachian State? 0. A big, fat goose egg. Now, I understand the transitive property in college football doesn't work like that, right? Week to week, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. That being said, though, guys, I am not, I'm not overreacting. We'll say that. I'm not overreacting to a win over Furman. I think you look across the board at line of scrimmage. We can't forget how that game started, right? It was 14-7 Furman at one point. It looked like it was going to be 14-14 going in a halftime. South Carolina finally decided to air it out, go downfield, kind of abandon the run more so, and, let their playmakers make plays, which, what a bright idea. But it worked out very well, kind of what we expected, right? The Gamecocks would just simply put out athlete Furman, and we got that. But there are still major issues for sure. I'm still worried about the offensive line, whether that's going to be trotting back out there guys like Sidney Fugar, Ja'Kai Moore, and Tyshawn Wanamaker, or, starting true freshmen like Big Tree Babalade and Trovon Bowe and Jatavius Shivers. I'm worried about that group, right? I'm still concerned about weapons outside of Xavier Legette. I know Eddie Lewis had a really good game. Amarian Brown did some things, and thankfully he's not too banged up. When does Juice Wells come back? We have no idea. Where are the tight ends, by the way, guys? I mean, Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, they've had a catch here or there, but they've been basically non-existent the first 2 weeks. And averaging 2.8 yards per carry against Furman. I saw a lot of comments. Let's go to the air raid. Let's just ditch the run completely. And that'll work against teams like Furman that don't have the bodies up front or maybe the athletes in the secondary or what have you, to expose you and make you pay for that. But guys, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle. I was going to say if you can't run the ball, but you can't run the ball. Let's call it for what it is. Unless you're taking on a team with a really, really weak defensive front, and there aren't many of those in the SEC, my greatest fear coming in the season still exists, which is when you get one-dimensional. Maybe against Furman it didn't hurt you, right? Because Xavier Legette was able to out-athlete Furman's DBs, right? We're talking about a Paladins defensive unit, secondary, I should say, that ranked outside of the top 100 last year in pass defense. But that ain't going to fly against Georgia, guys. It ain't going to fly against Mississippi State. It ain't going to fly against Tennessee. 2.8 yards per carry against Furman's defensive front. That greatly concerned me. And on the defensive side, you made the adjustments. Congratulations. You made the adjustments, but it was so shoddy early, man. And we've seen this story before. When the Gamecocks play a competent offense, a Power 5 offense, an SEC offense, we've seen the movie before and the ship still sinks. So yes, Saturday night against Furman, it was the bounce back you needed in every sense of the word. But I think there's still big issues on this football team. The one thing I'll say in closing is this. Momentum's a fickle mistress in college football. And above all else, the confidence that I think that win over Furman, the confidence South Carolina gained from that win, that could be the most beneficial thing for this group as they head into SEC play. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we've got my good friend, Chris Doering of SEC Network. He joins the show as he does each and every single Monday, guys. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Watch your Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, September the 11th. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, guys. In case you missed it, this was just announced. South Carolina will take on Mississippi State in what, about 10 days or so? Is that about? No, excuse me. About a little bit, about a week and a half, whatever it might be. We'll take on Mississippi State under the lights at Williams-Brice Stadium Saturday, September the 23rd. 7:30 p.m. kickoff on SEC Network. So, a game in which I really, guys, I'll be honest with you, I'm genuinely surprised. I will say, though, I think it's truly a testament to the night game environment at Willie B. Like, I think the SEC, I don't think they're biased to South Carolina in any way, but I don't know, man. Like, I just think the lights, sandstorm, like, it's just – it's always a great environment when they come. And I think that helps. Like, I think that greatly, greatly helps South Carolina in their case for getting night games. So either way, Gamecocks and Mississippi State set to do battle in week 4, 7:30 kickoff on SEC Network. Guys, that being said, as I mentioned, Chris Doering of SEC Network, he joins the show every single Monday to talk SEC, Gamecocks, college football as a whole, and much, much more, guys. So again, sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with our good friend Chris Doering of SEC Network. Joining us, as he does each and every single Monday, our good friend Chris Doering of SEC Network helps us break down all of the action from week 2, as well as look ahead to a packed week 3 slate. Chris, what's going on, my friend? Appreciate you taking the time. How are you?
Yeah, no, it's good to be with you, man. It's I'm hoping here as we get into the SEC schedule starting week 3, things calm down a little bit, but lots of games to cover here this past weekend, man.
Yeah, Chris, like you mentioned, really kind of closing out. I know for some teams the non-conference slates continue, but as we get into SEC play, for many teams out there, the final tune-ups, if you will. Chris, let me ask you this, because the SEC, let's call it for what it is, has had a rocky first 2 weekends, right? When you look at the record against the ACC teams, and even in these quote-unquote cupcake games, Chris, there's been a lot of teams that have just struggled or not looked straight out of the gate or whatever. And I know, I don't put a lot of stock in it because there's a lot of watered-down game plans and a lot of coaches keeping things tight to the vest. And a lot of teams, let's call it for what it is, Chris, like they see the schedule and they're like, they're not getting quite as hype and excited to play those games. But do you look at that, or are there some teams in the SEC or the SEC as a whole, do you have concern about what you're seeing, or do you think it's because of maybe something like the transfer portal has just brought that much parity to the sport, or something else you're seeing over the first couple of weeks?
Well, 2 separate scenarios we're talking about here. I don't put a lot of stock in the FCS games or even some of the Group of 5 games. I mean, it's, it is what it is. I can tell you as a player, especially as you get past the first week of the season and you're having to play FCS opponents, it just doesn't get your blood going the same way. So you can say what you want about being a competitor and going out there and handling your business, but there's an emotional part to playing football. So on the other part of your question, though, as it relates to playing other Power 5 conferences, this has been as disappointing a first couple weeks of the season as I can ever remember for the SEC. And we're not talking about mid-level teams. We're talking about the highest profile teams in this conference going out and getting beaten by opponents that we in recent years would have never even imagined could have been possible. You talked about the record against the ACC. I think, 1-4, I think, so far through 2 weeks. I get the best win of the first couple weekends is a win over a Group of 5 team, a ranked Group of 5 team, which Lane Kiffin called an SEC style opponent, and I wouldn't argue with that, but it is definitely concerning. And I think the reasons are kind of what you mentioned. NIL has evened things out a little bit. The immediate eligibility through the transfer portal has evened things out a little bit. I think, as you talk about Alabama, Georgia's success siphoning off some of the top talent has taken away from what Alabama typically has done. Texas A&M taking some of the top talent. teams just don't have the multiple levels of talent that they used to. And so it's, if you miss on a guy developing here or there, or you have injuries, it's going to cost you. And so it's great. I mean, we're watching the NFL occur at the college level now with parity and salary cap and everything else, the way that it's created such an even playing field at the National Football League level.
Chris, let's jump straight to the big one in Tuscaloosa, Alabama on Saturday night. Texas rolls into T-Town, and they take down Nick Saban 34-24. You look at that ball game, Jalen Milroe, a couple of costly interceptions. A really fun back-and-forth ball game, by the way. I mean, there were some things in that game that sort of happened beyond comprehension. My mind goes immediately to the fourth down where Texas fumbles. They somehow pick it up, get the first. Alabama struggling in different facets, especially, I thought, Chris, defensively, where their defensive line was not able to force a single sack in that ball game. And Quinn Ewers made them pay 24-38, 349, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, he was fantastic. You look at that ball game. What's your thoughts on Alabama? Is there a quarterback controversy there? It's one of those things where I said the same thing about LSU, Chris. I'll say this about Bama. I don't think it's going to define them. I think all their goals are still out there, but for a group that was already, being picked to fall off, or is this the end of the dynasty for Nick Saban, to have Texas come in, do what they did, it obviously doesn't help to change that narrative. Your thoughts on the classic that was that Texas and Bama game Saturday night?
Yeah, great ball game, obviously lived up to the hype, and it was back and forth, highly entertaining. But I'll go back to my thoughts in the preseason. I picked Alabama to go 9-3, finish second or maybe even third in the SEC West because I had concerns about the offensive line and the wide receiver position outside of just the quarterback spot. We were all a little fooled by what we saw against Middle Tennessee, I think. But at the end of the day, some of those problems still exist. And you talked about Alabama's defensive line not being able to get pressure on Quinn Ewers. The offensive line was beaten soundly as well. I mean, when was the last time we can talk about an Alabama team getting beaten on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball the way that they were? Say what you want about Jalen Milroe. He did make a couple costly turnovers, but he was under duress the entire night. I mean, there was never a chance where he was able to just calmly take his steps and set his feet and throw. If not for his athletic ability, he probably would have been sacked 10 times himself. So, anybody blaming him, you need to look a little deeper at the rest of what went on. I'll say this, though, Chris. The surprising part for me is that the days of Alabama having better talent than the other teams in the country is over with. I look at the matchups. Texas's wide receivers soundly beat the secondary of Alabama. Lines of scrimmage, we already talked about that. You look at the quarterbacks. I know they don't play against each other, but head-to-head, Quinn Ewers out-dueled what Milroe was able to do. There was not a position as we go down the tail of the tape, and that includes coaching, that I would have put the check in the column of the Alabama Crimson Tide, which is surprising to say.
We moved to Texas A&M, Chris, a team that, I did it again. I drank the Kool-Aid. I took the Aggies to cover 4. I think most folks were picking Texas A&M to go into Coral Gables, get the W, and they fall to Miami, and this is another disappointing SEC result, 48-33, the final in that one. Tyler Van Dyke was incredible, 5 touchdown passes. Connor Wegman throws a couple of picks. A&M, you talk about a team getting beat on the line of scrimmage. They could not run the football in this game. How disappointing is this for Texas A&M? Because I felt like, Chris, while the whole season's in front of them, this kind of felt like the early season test of if A&M is going to pop off and have that big year they've been waiting for under Jimbo Fisher. Like, this was the game. And Chris, a stat that I can't get out of my head right now that stood out to me earlier. Texas A&M is 1-7 in their last 8 games against Power 5 opponents. I mean, wow. I know the buyout is what it is, but depending on the price of oil at Thanksgiving, Texas A&M, and if they're sitting there at 6-5, God forbid, worse than that, it might be over in College Station. Is it too early am I overreacting too early to that?
Well, it's early to be talking about buyouts, I think, at this point. But I'm with you in that I am mad at myself. The old fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Like, I've been fooled again. I wasn't being fooled early in the offseason. And then I, like you, started drinking the Kool-Aid of all the returning starters and the Bobby Petrino effect and the sense of urgency. And then what we saw on Saturday afternoon, take everything I just said about Alabama and insert Texas A&M there, because Texas A&M was beaten in every single matchup they played. the secondary for Texas A&M was absolutely embarrassing. They should go to class on Monday and Tuesday this week and just wear a bag over their head, because it was embarrassing the way that they went about playing in man coverage. It was embarrassing the tackling after the catch. It was embarrassing just with the overall assignments of that entire defense. They need to go back and simplify, because I know they got some talent on that side of the ball, but they look like they have no idea what they're doing out there. They're afraid. They're tentative. They don't play their technique. And that's just the defensive side. I mean, offensively, I bought into this passing attack against New Mexico and receivers and everything else. The offense was staked to a 15-yard drive and a 9-yard drive because of some special teams errors. And after that, it just became a turnover fest and looking more like last year. But I'm disappointed, because I thought the Texas A&M was going to be different this year. And then watching that game, they got much deeper problems than I would have ever even imagined a week ago.
Chris, a game that sort of flew under the radar, Ole Miss and Tulane. The Rebels outscore the Green Wave in the second half, 27-3. A gutsy win on the road, right? Low-key tough place to play. Tulane, high-quality opponent. What did you take away from Lane Kiffin's squad going to New Orleans and getting a top 25 victory, by the way? Tulane sitting at 24th at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I never would have imagined that they would have had to come from behind against Michael Prattless Tulane squad. But backup quarterback played well in that one. Found themselves down double digits at one point in time in the half. After that first drive, they were getting owned on the line of scrimmage. I mean, there was very little that Ole Miss's offense was able to do because of the way that the Tulane defense was playing them on the line of scrimmage. So, I love the resiliency. And Jackson Dart talked about it after the game. Hey, we knew we were going to be tested. Sometimes those are the games you want, man, to see the kind of resiliency you have. And I love Lane Kiffin for being the gambler that he is, taking chances, made some bold calls in the second half, going for it on a fourth down instead of trying a field goal. I think that they are a very talented offense with a lot of great pieces when they get things going. I think they're going to be as good offensively as their offensive line is able to carry them. But that was a big win going in. Say what you want, it's a 40,000 seat stadium, but that was a good environment against as Lane Kiffin called them before the game, an SEC style team, and the marquee win so far of the SEC.
Now, Chris, the best of the rest, like I mentioned, we had a lot of SEC teams taking on, quote unquote, lesser competition. But teams like Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri almost lost, right? Some of these teams really, really struggled. Of course, the Gamecocks and Gators, they bounced back in a big way, although South Carolina, they were down early to Furman 14-7 in that one as well. And then the other two, the big Power 5 wins, Mississippi State takes down Arizona in overtime. I think a huge win for Zach Arnett with SEC play upcoming, LSU coming to town. And then Auburn, it was ugly. Listen, it was very ugly. A defensive slugfest out on the West Coast, which we're not used to. But the fact of the matter is this: Hugh Freeze and Auburn, they are 2-0. Samford awaits this weekend, probably going to be 3-0. All of a sudden, you're building momentum, and don't let Hugh Freeze get hot. What else jumped out to you specifically? Did anything stand out from week 2 of SEC play?
Well, let's start with the teams that lost. You mentioned Florida, South Carolina, LSU, all bounced back against inferior opponents, but it wasn't really about that as much as it was what I wanted to see. How much life they had. In Florida's case, could they execute? Could they just line up properly? Could they have the right jersey numbers on the field? They were much better. 6 of 6 in the red zone with 6 touchdowns. They were able to run the football effectively. Didn't give up sacks. They were able to avoid the big penalties, only 4 for 20 yards. So I liked what Florida did, and kind of cautiously optimistic about Tennessee coming to town with some of the struggles that they've had. South Carolina gives up 1 sack. Spencer Rattler was outstanding. Both games this year, I've gained so much respect for him. And it's easy to go back to last year and say, wow, he was awesome against Tennessee and awesome against Clemson. But, doing what he did last week against North Carolina with all that pressure he faced and all the times he got sacked, and coming back in this one, and, the team kind of starting slow and him, carrying him to victory offensively was impressive to me. And then LSU obviously got it going against a Grambling team that, was not up for the test, but they threw and caught better than they did against Florida State. So, good bounce back games for those guys. The Mississippi State-Arizona game was one of the weirdest games that I've ever seen. I don't even know how to really put it into words. Arizona turns it over 4 times on their first 4 possessions, and yet, the Bulldogs are only able to get 14 points out of it. Somehow, the turnover margin is +4, and they still have to go to overtime to win that game. But they did what they needed to do. I have a lot of respect for Jaden Delora. I hadn't seen him up close and personal like that, but he was definitely not afraid to keep slinging it and brought his team back in that ball game. But thank God for the state of Mississippi, man. Without them, we would really be in trouble. And you mentioned Auburn. It was more of a battle of ineptitude than anything else, but I give them credit for going out west and playing late, being able to find a way to win. Defensively, they did a great job in that. Got real concerns about the quarterback situation with Peyton Thorne. But all in all, man, I can't help but sound a little dejected here as I talk to you about the state of the conference. This is my 9th year with the SEC Network, and I've never experienced having to come on and kind of explain away some of the things that we're watching right now.
And Chris, as we look ahead to week 3, I'll say this on a side note. If the SEC is dropping games, I know Mizzou has a big opportunity against Kansas State. I'm not sure I saw the line in that one, but K-State is ranked 15th right now. Bama goes to South Florida in one of the weirdest road trips you will ever see. Vandy, UNLV, Ole Miss, Georgia Tech, Arkansas, BYU, Kentucky, Akron. So there's a couple of non-conference games there where the wins would be nice, but the losses would be a lot worse. We'll put it that way. It'd be a much more, the black eye would get even worse, I'd say, with the SEC. My attention, though, Chris, again, as we turn the page to week 3, goes directly to the swamp. Florida, Tennessee. Explain to me, with all due respect to Florida, how has it been 20 years since the Vols have won there, right? Like, because I heard that stat, and I was like, I don't know if I just haven't been paying attention. Like, I know Tennessee was bad for a while, but Florida had some hiccups too. Like, is there like some hex on Tennessee? Do you talk about the mental advantage that Florida has in that game? Because I think they're banking on that a lot on Saturday.
Yeah, I think there's a huge mental advantage when it comes to that. And the more people talk about it, the more it seeps into the head of players that weren't even alive in some cases in 2003. So I think part of it has to do, and you've been in the swamp before, right? I mean, it's an intimidating environment. It's noisy. It's tough to communicate, and things can get away from you quickly if you're not on top of it. I think it's also one of those things that, back in the day, Tennessee always used to say, man, if we played you guys at the end of the year, we'd beat you. And unfortunately, in 2001, with the 9/11 attacks, that game did get moved to the end of the season, and they did, in fact, win there against Coach Berger. But I think there's something to the fact of the training that goes on in the offseason. September is brutal, and not that it's not in Tennessee, but the heat and humidity in the north central Florida area, playing in the swamp below ground where there's very little wind and the humidity just eats you up down there. I think there's something to that as well. And I think it's going to be especially tough for Joe Milton. I've been a defender of Joe Milton's in the offseason, and I've seen kind of mixed results so far through 2 weeks. But the thing that has been missing, Chris, is where's the deep ball? Where's the big explosive passing plays? I think they only have 4 plays of 20 yards or more in the passing game in the first 2 games of the season. Now, I know they've tried to run the ball a little bit, but what they scored 10 points in the first half of that ball game on Saturday against Austin Peay. So I'm worried about Tennessee's ability to do what they did so well last year, and that's hit those big back-breaking pass plays that they were able to hit. So I love that Florida, as a Florida guy, I love that they catch Tennessee now. Joe Milton, this will be the toughest environment that he's stepped into as a starting quarterback on the road. I think Austin Armstrong, say what you want about the way that the Utah game went, but outside of that long, 70-yard touchdown on the first play, I thought the defense played pretty well, and they showed some improvement last week against McNeese. And I think that Austin Armstrong will have a big plan ready for Joe Milton in that offense.
Chris, I'm not sure if it's more so due to, my impressions also of Florida's defense being stout, and also, like you mentioned, the strange somewhat struggles of Joe Milton. And I mean, they really just played around with Austin Peay. It's 6-3 Austin Peay, mid to late second quarter. They finally got it going a little bit. And the second half, they took care of business. But I mean, this game for Florida, do you feel like this would be kind of a signature win for Billy Napier if he can get this one?
Certainly would be. I mean, I feel like they let one get away and playing Utah without Cam Rising in the lineup, without their tough tight end in the lineup. So this is a game that I think they could change the narrative pretty quickly. It was fun to watch. It seemed like a lot of fun in the swamp. It seemed like a lot of people were having a good time, but the attention gets more serious this week with the SEC slate starting, and obviously with Tennessee, one of Florida's biggest rivals on the schedule, coming into town. So if you're able to win this ball game, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off of the program right now. I think it provides optimism, which is something this fan base needs in a big way. But one of the things I think that Coach Spurrier and Coach Meyer did really, really well, besides winning national championships, was winning against the rivals. And those are the games you got to have. I mean, Michigan finally breaking through and beating Ohio State the last 2 years. That's done a lot for Jim Harbaugh and that Michigan program. You got to find a way to beat your rivals. And I think, getting an opportunity to beat Tennessee would help Billy Napier's cause significantly.
Chris, we take it to Athens, Georgia. Gamecocks go between the hedges as nearly 4 touchdown underdogs in this one. You mentioned Spencer Rattler, though. Let's stick with that because, like you said, the play over the first 2 weeks, I mean, he goes 25 for 27 on Saturday night, over 300 yards. Again, a couple of touchdown passes, really in control. In South Carolina, Chris, I mean, they struggled to run the ball again. 2.8 yards per carry. They did protect him much better, and I thought you saw South Carolina change some things up on the offensive line and get some better results. Xavier Legette, also his favorite target. He leads all Power 5 receivers in receiving yards. Just talk about, Chris, the value of having, you were a wide receiver, the value of having a supremely confident quarterback. I know those Florida teams you were on, you guys were underdogs to many, but it feels like when, you can have all kinds of deficiencies or problems and things you have to overcome. But when you've got the guy at QB1 that is your leader vocally and in the locker room and on the field, and, he's playing his best, it gives the football team just a different level of confidence to go out and play their very best.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I played for the Steelers, and Antoine Randall was our punt returner, kickoff returner. And I remember the feeling of going out there, being on the punt return team, knowing that at any moment he could break one for a touchdown. So it made you block a little harder. It made you block a little longer. It made you believe that every time you were forcing a punt, it was going to go back the other way for a touchdown. And I think that's the same thing you talk about with a quarterback. Like, playing with Danny Warfel, there was never any doubt that he was going to get us into the right play, that he was going to throw to the right place on the field based upon what the defenses were doing, and that ball was going to be on time and on target. And I think it definitely makes the offensive line block more. I think it makes the receivers all run their routes and make sure that they're live and get their head around. So I think there's something to that. Now, the problem is that if you can't block up front, and this is my fear this week, that you negate all of that goodwill. When your quarterback's getting hit time and time again, at some point in time, he's going to get shell-shocked. And this is another level of defensive front that Georgia brings into this game above where North Carolina was. No disrespect to Chiz's defense, but these are next level dudes. And the problem, you talked about Xavier Legette. I love the guy, but who's going to take some of the pressure off of him? Like, I don't know the status of Juice Wells. Maybe you know that a little bit better than I do. But the teams that I played on at Florida, we went 5 deep. My senior year, it was me, Travis McGriff, Jacquez Green, Ike Hilliard, Riedel Anthony. I mean, you couldn't. It was pick your poison. And I don't see that there's a lot of those guys that are able to take the pressure off of Xavier Legette right now. I'd love to have Juice back there because I think it'd be a potent 1-2 combo. But just having him out there is one thing. Having him healthy is another. So I do think there are some things to be optimistic about, but it all comes back to your ability to protect up front.
Chris, to your point, the status of Juice Wells will go a long way in this one. It's been one of those things where the gamesmanship, if that's what you want to call it, from Shane Beamer, he's good to go. He's out there, but he's not really out there. You know what I mean? Like, he's just the decoy, the window dress, what have you. Zeroing in, Chris, specifically on Georgia, back-to-back blowout wins or lesser competition, but back-to-back slow starts for Georgia, specifically offensively. Is that something that when you look at them concerns you at all with Carson Beck, Mike Bobo, and sort of this retooled offense, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think this schedule is perfect for this team that Georgia has this year, with the new starting quarterback, Carson Beck, taking over, with the injuries, Ladd McConkey on the sideline the last 2 weeks, the running back position banged up like it is. I mean, you had Dylan Bell, a wide receiver, playing running back. Some ended up scoring a touchdown with some pretty running back looking moves that he was able to get himself into the end zone with. But it's funny, man. I was thinking about this at dinner. I'm sitting there by myself thinking about, the days of Alabama kind of just dominating the conference, and how, Georgia's kind of taken over the mantle of the best team in the league. But even Georgia, to me, I don't know if they're infallible. Like they haven't played anybody yet, but I don't know that they have the same dominance, or at least right now, the feeling of the same dominance that they've had the last couple seasons. No disrespect, I don't think South Carolina's in a position right now where they can go toe to toe with them yet. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Georgia lose one or maybe even 2 games this year. I just think there's so much parity in this conference, so much parity nationally, that it's tough to go undefeated. And there's a lot of questions about this Georgia team, and certainly their focus. Brock Bowers comes out every week. That dude plays hard as hell. Only had 1 catch for 3 yards in the game on Saturday, but I think you're seeing some other guys get an opportunity. Mekhi Muse has been a great story in the first couple of games of the season. You saw Oscar Delp make a big play. So I think it's been good for Georgia to find some other guys that they can count on, and try to develop a little rhythm with a new quarterback. But I'm still not 100% convinced that they're, what we've seen the last 2 seasons.
Chris, a tall task awaits South Carolina, to say the least, on Saturday between the hedges. I'll ask you this: what would have to happen for the Gamecocks to shock the college football world? You might recall back in 2019, they were in somewhat of a similar position. By the way, with Alabama's loss, Georgia now holds the nation's longest home game winning streak. Their last loss was indeed that 19 game to South Carolina. But I mean, in your mind, what would, let's just say, have to happen for South Carolina, us to look up start of the 4th quarter and say this is a 1-score game?
You remember that game? I mean, that Will Muschamp defense got after the quarterback that day. I mean, it was pressure all day long. It was forcing bad throws. Who was it? Israel Mukwamu, I think, had 2 pick sixes. Just a tremendous game. So I think it's going to have to come down to turnovers. South Carolina's going to need to win the turnover margin by probably 2 or 3, maybe a defensive or special teams score, something that South Carolina's shown the propensity to do in the past. I think they're going to have to be able to play much better on the line of scrimmage. You don't just line up and drive the ball typically down Georgia's throat, so you got to be able to hit some explosive plays, and that requires maybe a little bit more time for the quarterback to take his steps and throw it. But I really think it comes down to the combination of creating turnovers, non-offensive scores, and explosive plays on offense.
LSU, Mississippi State, Chris, on the big-time SEC matchup, all-conference matchup, if you will, and that's the only other one on the slate, by the way. Feels like somewhat of a trap spot for LSU, if we're being totally honest. Going on the road, Stark Vegas, a weird place. And, Chris, I said this over the summer that I expect weird things to happen with the ghost of the Pirate, if you will, kind of looking down. But, State's had some issues offensively, transitioning to this Kevin Barbay offensive scheme, if you will. What do you expect from that ball game, and do you think State could realistically pull the upset in that one?
Yeah, I would agree with you that it would normally be a trap game, except LSU losing to FSU, I think, created a little different sense of urgency for them. I think it shined a light on some things that they have had to go back to the drawing board with. I think, it exposed some lack of physicality. And so I think that's probably something that they're, intent on going in, knowing how different this offense is, the way that they transitioned into being a little bit more of a pro-style run-oriented offense. I mean, Will Rogers, what he ended up throwing, I think, 12 or 13 times in the game on Saturday. I mean, it was a weird game to say the least. But I do think that it's going to come down to who can be the more physical team in this game. It's a little more of a throwback to the old days of SEC football. I think the identity of Kevin Barbay's offense and Zach Arnett's team as a whole fits better in Starkville than what the air raid. It was kind of a gimmicky feeling situation. But I think Mississippi State's, always been a little more of a physical oriented program. And LSU, I think, needs to get back to that as well. So LSU has the better talent when you go tail of the tape across the board. But you're right, Starkville's a weird place to play. We lost there on a Thursday night game back in 1992. And probably we're the better team in that one. We've seen plenty of other teams that had the advantage in talent go in there and lose as well. But I think it's something that certainly LSU knows that Mississippi State has their full attention because of it.
Chris, to your point, the adjustment for Bulldogs fans is real in Starkville. Will Rogers went 13 of 17 for 162, 3 touchdowns. Jarquavius Marks ran the football 24 times. I don't recall the last time they had a running back with 24 carries. It's just a new era for sure at Mississippi State. Chris Doering of SEC Network, fantastic stuff as always. Chris, one last thing before I get you out of here.
Yeah.
If you got to go on record right now, we've seen Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina all struggle. Florida has their issues. Vandy lost on Saturday. My friend, who in the world is the second best team in the SEC East right now? Because
I have no idea.
It's almost like it's wide open and none of them want to take it.
I have no idea, man. It's a great point. I was on the Kentucky train in the offseason, but what we saw on Saturday against Eastern Kentucky, the uncertainty of the health of Liam Cohen is certainly something that we're thinking about and praying for him and his family. There's a lot going on there, man. I think, you go back to maybe one of they dealt with a lot of issues in Lexington the last few years. And I think maybe one of the biggest things that they haven't been able to figure out is, since the passing of John Schlarman, the great offensive line coach, they haven't really been able to duplicate the success up front on the big blue wall that used to be there. So, I don't know if I can go with them. Certainly can't go with Florida. Can't go with Missouri after watching the way that they played middle on Saturday. South Carolina doesn't do it for me. I get maybe Tennessee at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them lose in Gainesville on Saturday. So I have no idea, Chris. That to answer your question, I am going to refrain from going on record because I have no idea.
Well, Chris, the good news is this: as SEC play begins, we're going to start to get some answers, and that truly is the fun part, my friend. Chris Doering of SEC Network joins us every single Monday. Chris, great stuff as always. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll do it again next week.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me, man. Talk to you later.
Okay, that was our good friend Chris Doering, SEC Network. Always a pleasure to chat with him and talk all things SEC football, college football, everything in between. That being said, guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we're opening up to you all our Q&A Power Hour questions, comments, and calls from you. I want to hear from you on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home. Call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, September the 11th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. That being said, the Q&A Power Hour is officially underway. I want to hear from you, taking your questions, your comments, your calls. 843-790-3377 as the phone lines are officially open. We'll go back through your questions also, guys. Again, it's not just YouTube, Twitter and Facebook as well. Twitter, the only platform, though, that we do not see any of your comments. So if you're commenting on Twitter, we are not seeing that to inform you. But that being said,
Robbie Davis,
let's jump
Zaxby's Hall of Famer.
Robbie Davis, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I want to say two things first before I tell you my thoughts on the game real quick. First thing, it is my brother Chandler's 31st birthday today. So shout out to him. He's at work right now at his church. So shout out to him. It's his birthday today. Okay. And I got to see my cousin, who is a freshman at USC, Saturday night. Got to hang out with her for a little bit. But that's as far as non-football related, that's all I got. Okay, now let's get to the, as I like to say, the meat and potatoes of the convo, okay? As far as quarterback is concerned, okay, obviously we know who the starting QB is, okay? And I know it's way too early to say this, but in my opinion, if Lenore Sellers gets, I don't care if it's garbage time against Georgia, I don't care, whatever it is, or if he plays, say just for the hell of it, he plays the whole game against Jacksonville State. Just bear with me here. If he can get some pieces, or if we can get pieces around him and get an offensive line that actually knows how to block, this team could be deadly for a couple of years.
Yeah, Robbie. I mean, listen, I love what I saw from Sellers on Saturday night. How could you not? I mean, we got excited about it in the spring game. We got to see limited action, and obviously seeing him, live bullets, granted against Furman, but you see the ability, right? You see the talent. He's obviously still very raw as a youngster, but yeah, I mean,
and
listen,
he's got an arm too.
Yeah, I mean, if they can surround him with high quality pieces, which there's no reason to believe they cannot do that, but if they can surround him with high quality pieces, I don't think there's any reason to believe why he will not be a big time football player at South Carolina. So that's what you got to remember, right? I mean, Connor Shaw didn't do it by himself.
Right.
I mean, I love Connor Shaw, but he didn't do it by himself. Steven Garcia didn't do it by himself. No great quarterback does it by themselves, but you need that big time signal caller to make it go. And Lenore Sellers,
right.
Based off what we've seen, I think there's a lot that points in the direction of he is going to be a big time guy for South Carolina. So it's exciting. I'm just honestly, I'm glad he got on the field. We did not get to see this last year. We didn't get to see any of the backups get in the game. So the fact that Shane Beamer and the company were committed to emptying the bench and playing different guys and giving guys opportunities. And, how many of those opportunities will realistically come around during SEC play? I don't know. But, even if you can just get him back out there for, say, the Jacksonville State game, maybe the Vanderbilt game, I think it's a positive, man. And you go into 2024, who knows what will happen in the bowl game. So, right. I think that, I think that'll be good for Lenore Sellers to get that experience heading into what's inevitably going to be a quarterback battle entering spring practice of next year.
For sure. It'll be an interesting topic of conversation, which for at least for 2 years, we didn't have no quarterback controversy, which that felt great for a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I liked what I saw from Mario Anderson. And like you said, he runs pissed. And if you play running back and you don't run pissed, you're playing the wrong position, okay? Because you're getting hit just about every play. So you have to play that position like somebody daggum took a piss in your cornflakes, okay?
He definitely runs with that edge. He definitely runs with that edge for sure.
Like, and can you imagine the damage he could probably do, or any of our running backs for that matter, if we had not a great offensive line, but at least a decent offensive line? We'd actually be able to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think a lot of the conversation, Robbie, about the running back position, I mean, if you had an elite offensive line, it would kind of solve itself. Because again, I don't say anything about, I think Mario Anderson should get more touches, but that's not to say because DeCarrion Joyner's doing something wrong. But when you have the deficiencies up front that you do, you got to try some different things to get a spark, in the running game. And I mean, 2.8 yards per carry against Furman. I think that's the thing we are so conveniently glossing over. And, I know we were all looking at the passing stats and what Rattler has done and Xavier Legette. And those things are great. Those things are great. Take nothing away from it. But, I mean, I just, I look at the SEC slate and I say, I don't know how South Carolina is going to run the football. I have no clue. No clue whatsoever. Like, there are 10 games left. How many of those 10 games does South Carolina eclipse 100 yards rushing? They did it against Furman, but 108 yards rushing against Furman. I just I think it's going to be a very I think the rushing attack is almost certainly going to be worse than it was last year. I mean, it's certainly on pace for that.
But I mean, if you want to fix the running game problems, you got to get the big uglies up front, and you got to get the right ones.
And that's why they're recruiting the way they are, Robbie. That's why they're recruiting the way they are. So, I mean, I think help, I know that help is certainly on the way, but, that doesn't make it any easier to be patient in the short term for sure.
And one quick thing, and then I'll get off of here, I promise.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think if I was our defensive coordinator, this is exactly what I would do, okay? I would do everything I possibly could to stop the run and force Georgia's quarterback to beat us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we'll talk more about that Georgia matchup and key matchups and all that good stuff later in the week. But I'd agree with you. I mean, I think you got to make an unproven quarterback in Carson Beck, unproven in the sense of has never done it in an SEC game as a QB1. You got to put the game on his shoulder, right? If Georgia's able to run the ball, you have no chance. I mean, you just have no chance, right?
Yeah,
so
if they're getting 5 to 10 yards a pop, we're screwed.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, it's if they're able to run the football, it's going to be a long day, no doubt.
But you never know. I mean, we could again. We could. It might not happen, but we could. Or it's most likely not going to happen because of how good their defense is. But we could go in there and shock the world again.
From your lips,
I remember 2019.
From your lips to God's ears, Robbie Davis. From your lips to God's ears.
So I will be watching every second of it, regardless of what happens, and I will have my prediction, as always, ready to go Thursday.
Beautiful. Well, I cannot wait to hear it, man. This will be interesting. SEC play getting underway, and now the real fun begins, my friend. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say and your thoughts on the game.
No problem. I will talk to you later. Go Gamecocks, and to heck with Clemson. To heck with them. Bunch of pansies.
To heck with them indeed, Robbie. Well said as always, my friend.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
Yeah, man. You too. Appreciate you. Take care. Great stuff from Robbie Davis. As always, guys, phone lines are open, 843-790-3377. Really quickly, guys, I just mentioned the lack of running game, if you will. Just to give you some perspective, let me pull this up on the laptop here. I'm telling you, this mouse right here, you probably can't see it. If you're listening via podcast, you may not know what I'm talking about, but the wireless mouse changed the game for us. I remember we first started doing this with the new setup, and I was like, there's no way I'm about to be leaning down, trying to change stuff, what have you. Thank goodness we're not doing that. To give you some perspective, though, South Carolina's rushing woes. The Gamecocks, through 2 games, North Carolina and Furman, have ran the football 70 times for 106 yards. That is good enough for 1.51 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns, 53 yards per game. And those numbers are good enough for 127th in college football. So, and I hear a lot of people say, well, Chris, I mean, look, Colorado is 124th, and they are, right? And they're having great success. While I understand that, it is, in my opinion, much easier to get away with that when you're playing Nebraska and you're playing teams like TCU, whose defensive fronts, just let's call it for what it is, they're not very good. Now, they're scheming around it as well as anybody out there in college football. They really are. But if you can't run the football in the SEC, you typically get exposed. Like, there aren't many teams out there that win. There aren't many teams out there that win and win at a high level and compete with the elites not being able to run the football. And again, guys, we'll talk more about this Georgia matchup and this game specifically on Saturday as the week goes on. But, I'm concerned. I mean, 2.8 yards per carry against Furman. And I know that, listen, we got these young guys up front with Babalade and Bo and Shivers, and there's some great young talent in that room. But it's like I told you guys over the course of the offseason, playing true freshmen on the offensive line, that's not a recipe for winning and winning big in the SEC. It's just not. It's just not. Getting your feet wet in SEC competition, Athens, Georgia is not quite the place to do that. But same time, end of the day, you've got to get them out there at some point. You know what I mean? So, anyways, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Manis says, could be wrong, but Jimmy Bradford shared a quote that we're 12-1 in a Beamer when rushing for 100-plus yards. Haven't been able to fact check it. I mean, that sounds about right. When South Carolina runs the football and they run it well, they win. I mean, that's just – and it's not even like significantly well, right? Like, just hit 100 yards in a game. Just give enough of a running game to have a semblance of balance, right? Let's see. Coach Ford been chiming in. UGA has more talent than we seem to want to discuss. They can get after us better than UNC and have better dudes on the back end than UNC. Well, Coach Ford, I think anybody who doesn't think Georgia has better dudes than UNC is off their rocker. They're crazy. Coach Ford, again, we are going to discuss Georgia in full detail. I like to spend Monday looking back on the game that was. But if you guys want to talk about it, hey, give us a call in. We'll talk about Georgia. I promise you, Coach Ford and everybody else, you're going to hear my full thoughts breakdown really on Wednesday is when we start to talk about it more in depth. The game that's upcoming, if you will. So I'm excited for it. I mean, listen, I'm pumped. Very, very pumped to watch the Gamecocks begin SEC play. And, I'm just excited, guys, because honestly, like, I don't know about you guys, but I almost feel bad for Kentucky and Mizzou fans. Like, I don't understand why you would schedule 4 consecutive non-conference teams to open your season. Like, what is the fun in that? Like, what do you learn about your football team through 4 weeks? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, Kentucky, I think, has Akron this week. Like, when do y'all play somebody with a pulse? You know what I mean? Like, that to me. And then they got Vandy next week. And, like, there's no reason Kentucky is going to be 4-0 and have beaten nobody worth a damn. You know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy to me. I don't know. It's crazy to me. At the same time, though, I'm sure it would feel good to be 4-0. Anyways, Jeffrey Long can't stop the run yet again. New defensive coordinator. We're already talking about it. Let's see. Let's to your point, let's look at these numbers. Rushing, and the rushing defense actually was not terrible. It wasn't terrible on Saturday night. It got much better. It was bad early. It got better. South Carolina, though, right now, let's see. Okay, that's rushing offense. Where's rushing defense? Yeah, I'm actually pulling these stats up right now. All right, here is rushing defense. Let's see. Let's see how the Gamecocks have fared stopping the run. Okay, so South Carolina is not on the last page, which is a good thing. Good sign. Okay, Gamecocks ranked 71st right now in rushing defense, 124 yards per game, allowing just 3.54 yards per carry, but obviously a big test and a big challenge upcoming this weekend between the hedges. So, Jeffrey Long, to your point, though, new DC, changes at DC. I think that stuff's going to play itself out. I do, Jeffrey. I don't dislike Clayton White. I'm not really there yet in regards to fire Clayton White or what have you, but I don't understand the slow starts. I don't get it. And admittedly, guys, as I mentioned in one of the previous segments, my mind is not totally changed on the same way that I watched LSU lose to FSU and Bama lose to Texas and a lot of these other smaller games as well. Like, I think my mind is not really changed on what South Carolina is as a football team. Saturday was a great game to reinstill some confidence, to have something to feel good about, to beat up on a lesser opponent. But the fact of the matter is this: the Gamecocks have played one game against Power 5 competition and got their teeth kicked in for the most part. So until we see the Gamecocks, either it's on Saturday and they play much better against Georgia than maybe some are giving them credit they're going to do, whether it's the following week South Carolina comes out, which we now know it's a home game at Williams-Brice against Mississippi State, they come out and they beat Mississippi State or what have you. Until we see that, you know, I don't – the Furman game doesn't change my mindset on like what this team is, right? This is a team that all of the deficiencies are still there. The offensive line still a massive, massive deficiency and massive question mark. Spencer Rattler's still a quarterback that gives you a chance to win. Xavier Legette is one of the best storylines of this early season, if you will. And then defensively, I still am very, very I'm very pessimistic on the defensive line. I don't like the defensive front. I think the defensive front is weak. I think the linebacker position with Mo Kaba out is questionable to say the least. And I think at defensive back, while Nick Eamon-Warry's out, it's I think it's a somewhat of a shoddy group. They're the strength of your defense, but I mean, we saw some times against Furman where I don't know, it looked a little bit leaky at times, in my opinion. But all in all, again, 47-21 win. Listen, I'm not the guy, guys. Like, I'm not going to come out here on a Monday. You can always expect me to be real and be critical and all that good stuff. But I believe in giving credit where credit's due. It's like I told you guys last year, right? Like, if you cannot be happy in the wins, then you just should stop watching college football. You should stop watching your favorite team, because it's a guarantee you're going to be miserable in the defeats. So if you can't be happy when your team wins, I don't care who the opponent is. I don't care what the score is. If you can't be happy when your team wins, if watching college football is something that only brings you angst and disappointment, like, why not just find another hobby? Like, why not find something to do that doesn't bring you such angst and such distaste and disappointment? You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to give credit where credit's due, but we'll also keep it real when talking about this game against Georgia and moving forward. And this football team, listen, they still have issues, still have things to figure out. But, again, momentum's a fickle mistress. And, I think some guys, some things coming together and gelling and clicking. And I think that's what a game like Furman can provide. It's just, you start to, you get some positive results because you feel like you have players with talent, right? And they get some positive results and you're able to use that. And, you're able to use that and build off of that. And some guys gain some more confidence, if you will. And so, we'll see if they can carry that, but you couldn't have asked for a tougher SEC opener, than the game in Athens, by the way. So I'll say the other thing too, guys, about Georgia. We talked about it at the top of the show when we did the Monday morning quarterback segment. I know a lot of people out there saying that, Georgia looks beatable. They're not really all that good. Like, guys, I think if you're falling into that trap, you're making a huge mistake. I really do. I think you're making a huge mistake, man. Like, can South Carolina go out there and hang with Georgia? And could something crazy happen and they win? Sure. But to say that Georgia's not very good it's a foolish thing to say. Now, do they look as dominant early on? Like, no. I mean, they have a new quarterback, right? They have a new offensive coordinator. They have 2 brand new tackles. They have things they're working through as well. But you can bet your ass Georgia's going to show up and they're going to play a damn good football game on Saturday. Like, I just, to sit here and say that, Georgia, they're not all that great. Like, that to me is, you're falling into a massive trap if you're going into that. If you're going into Saturday's game with that school of thinking, you are really doing yourself a disservice and setting yourself up for some major heartache. Yeah, Brewer Nation, it's kind of ironic that a year ago today, the spread came out for the Georgia game last year, and the spread was right at what it's at now, or what it opened at, 26. And I remember when I dropped my score prediction last year, my score prediction for the game last year was 41-10. And it's funny looking back at this stuff because I see all the comments, what have you, and people are just like, no way, man, it's going to be way closer. Like, nah, bro, at home at Willie B, like, no way. And of course, as we all know, the score ended up being 48-7. right? So, like, I just, we'll talk about this more, I think, later in the week, but, kind of one of the sad things, because I grew up in the CSRA, right? The North Augusta, Aiken, that area, if you will. And so I grew up hating Georgia more than Clemson, right? Because I went to church with, went to school with, hung around Georgia fans, and I mean, they were obnoxious, right? At that time, Clemson was a 6-win-a-year program just like South Carolina. So it was good, fun, rivalry banter, if you will. But Georgia, with David Green, David Pollock, Mark Richt, like, they were elite. DJ Shockley, if you will, like, they were that team to beat. And I mean, the Georgia fans were ruthless, man. They were ruthless. But you could always count on that Carolina-Georgia game being close. Like, you could just, for whatever reason, every single year, it's just like, it didn't make sense almost. But South Carolina was that gnat, that fly in Georgia's soup that just kept giving them problems, giving them headaches every single year, no matter how good or bad each team was, no matter how good or bad, right? Like, didn't matter how good Georgia was, didn't matter where Carolina was. Carolina played a damn good game against Georgia, and that was the case, it felt like, every year. I hate to say that I feel like that's been lost, right? Like, you look at this series of late, and I'll try to find the stats here. I posted this yesterday in the Big Cock Club Discord. But outside of 2019, guys, a game in which the Gamecocks won the football game, there hadn't been a single game in this series decided by single digits since 2015. And I know I'm kind of nitpicking, like, time frames, if you will, because from 2010 to 2013, the Gamecocks, and then 2014, I should say, they lost in 13 but beat them in 14. From 2010 to 2014, the Gamecocks pretty much dominated Georgia, which was stunning. But the South Carolina-Georgia series, it just unfortunately does not have the same juice, I think, that it once did, because Georgia has just beaten South Carolina's brains in on a pretty consistent basis. Since 2015, guys, like I mentioned, the Gamecocks have won just one game. That was 2019, which was the upset of all upsets. Outside of that, the other years, starting in 2015, Georgia has won the game by 32, 14, 14, 24, 29, 27, and 41. So, I mean, these games haven't been close. I mean, they just haven't even been remotely close. So, a tight, competitive ball game, a second half ball game would be a welcome sight. It really would. It would be a welcome sight for Gamecocks football. Realistically, it'd be a step in the right direction, and I don't know, nobody wants to hear that going into Carolina Georgia week. Nobody wants to hear, hey, if you just lose by single digits, it's a success. But you really have to be realistic and look at where these two teams are and where these two programs are, and blame Will Muschamp for setting the Gamecocks back, it felt like 100 years, and putting them behind the 8 ball. If you want to do that, that's fine. But realistically, right now, where these two teams are, I think Shane Beamer is building this thing the right way in the trenches, but it's just going to take some time. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, guys. We'll talk a lot more about Carolina, Georgia this week. Yeah, 40. Somebody said 40. Cameron Blasting game. 41 is mad crazy. Yeah, Cameron, 41 was last year. So 41 was last year. Tommy Wallace, this feels a lot like Tennessee game week last year. Just come off a bad loss, doom and gloom. No one gave him a chance. Well, Tommy, we're not coming off a bad loss. We're coming off of the Furman win. So I don't think they're quite identical. Also, Tommy, this Georgia team, they ain't Tennessee. Bottom line, they ain't Tennessee. So and this game's also not at home. So anyways, guys, like I mentioned, really quickly, by the way, let's see. Let me go back to the top here. There was a really exciting announcement for the band homies. Our good friend Brendan M. posted, if I can find it. Let's see. Where did this comment go? Is it at the very, very, very top? Oh, here we go. Brendan, yes. Shout out to the band homies marching in the 2024 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Shout out to the band homies. That's awesome. That's incredible. I'm sure that'll be a great experience for the band homies. And yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, Coleman Hall. Yes, for those that missed it, we are back on Facebook, back on X as well. So if you want to tune in, if you want to tune in to any of those outlets, any of those entities, you can do so. You can find us there. It hurts and burns, my Johns. What a username. Appreciate you for the super chat, my friend. I think we had one more. Yeah, from him as well. We're going to kill the dogs. Hey, thank you. Thank you for the super chat, guys. You want to support the business, support the channel, support the content, support everything we do. And you're on YouTube, you can. Super chats, super stickers, and we greatly appreciate it. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, I want to continue to hear from you. More of your questions, your comments, your calls, and more on the other side. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, September the 11th, 2023. We are taking your questions, your comments, your calls, because it is the Q&A Power Hour. We do this every single third hour of the show. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in case you missed it. You can now catch us on Facebook and X every single day. We're going back to our roots. Of course, we used to do this back in the day, streaming across all platforms, condensed it, thought, you know what, YouTube is the superior platform. But I recently had a change of heart. Like, you know what? Why limit the show in regards to forcing people to go to YouTube if they don't want to? So, hey, no matter what platform you're on, thank you all so much for tuning in. Leave us your questions, your comments, and, of course, give us a call, 843-790-3377. Tommy Wallace says, does Rattler see this game as his chance to get back in the conversation at the top? I mean, yeah, listen, if he balls out against Georgia, the national conversation will start to shift on Spencer Rattler. No doubt. No doubt. Jacob E., I think Dak is getting most of the RB1 work due to his pass blocking ability and receiving ability. The other backs are a little smaller. May not hold up in pass pro. Braswell might could, but he's young. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it, Jacob E. Again, in no way am I saying I don't think they should ditch the Kerryon Joyner, go completely away from him, because, you know, as high as we are right now on Mario Anderson the Monday after the Furman game, just admittedly, we might be singing a different tune after the Georgia game, right? We may be like, well, damn, he doesn't look all that great against SEC competition, right? So I think they need to use everyone until something sticks. I just, you know, the running game is far from solved. It's going to be a work in progress. The O-line is going to continue to be a work in progress. So, but I think what Mario Anderson showed you at least is that, you know, he's capable. Like, there's something there that I think you should give it a look. So, yeah, I think you're going to see more of Mario Anderson, but I think all four are going to play, and they're just going to kind of try to figure out, okay, this is, you know, this is our best rotation, and go from there. So to create some sort of running game. Tommy Wallace also says how much chance we have, I'm not sure, but QB1 gives us a chance. This could be the game that turns his career around and puts him back on all the talking heads. Listen, when you have a quarterback, you have a chance, guys. And I'd almost say more importantly, because I think back to that Georgia game last year, guys, and I think back to the game plan, and that was the game that the Kerryon Joyner third down, the first third down of the game where he gets inserted at quarterback, and the play, you know, we all know the Satterfield experience, right? So you got a confident Spencer Rattler going into Athens. That's a good place to start. Let's jump back to the phone lines here.
From Peyton.
Peyton, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Good. How about yourself on this Victory Monday?
I am doing fantastic, my friend. I appreciate you asking what's going on.
So, you mentioned earlier in the show you kind of want to keep it about this past weekend's game, and I'm sure that me and you will talk more in depth about Georgia more this week. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Furman, what I saw, just to elaborate on some of the stuff I called in about in the post-game show. Braswell and Mario Anderson, I think, gave us a big spark in the run game. It definitely now putting the new faces in and switching some new guys into the O-line rotation definitely helped with that. But I'll say this, man, just based on what my TV showed me, what I saw, Mario Anderson looks like, without a doubt, the most pure running back that we have in the stable. And I think going forward, I think it should be 1A Mario Anderson and 1B Dak Joyner. I just think when you watch him when he's in the backfield, before he enters the hole and as he's entering the opening, he's hitting that hole with some serious speed. Unlike what you saw with Dak Joyner. Dak Joyner, I think I've seen him moving in open space, and I think me and you talked about it over the summer. I think the weight gain might have cost him some agility. I'll say that. But Mario Anderson looked like the real deal. Now, all things considered, against the Furman Paladins, he looked solid against the Furman Paladins. Now, I'm not sure how solid any of our Gamecocks are going to look this Saturday, but I'll say this: I do trust Spencer Rattler not to make any stray throws, errors. I'm not expecting Rattler to come in and throw. How many picks did he have in last year's Georgia game? Do you have that stat? I want to say
I think he had two. I think he had two in that game.
Two.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think it was no touchdowns, 2 picks in that ball game.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I don't think he's going to throw a pick against Georgia. I just we got a lot of promise out of that game. Now, like I said, this cannot be understated. This was against the Furman Paladins that our offense looked this successful against. But I think I agree with you in saying that the infusion of youth into the O-line, infusion of fresh, hungry talent, I think that proved positive for us, and I think we ought to stick with that game plan going into Georgia, especially with this is probably, if not number one, the number 2 most talented front 7 in college football. And I think in order for us to get our guys ready for the next week and the week after that, and as this season goes on, especially our young guys, I think baptism by fire. I think pressure makes diamonds, and I think we got some diamonds in the rough in the locker room.
Peyton, a lot of great points, man. I mean, listen, I think that it's a work in progress for sure, and it's tough to do that against a team like a Georgia. I mean, like you mentioned, I'm not one of these out here that, I'm sure you already know this, but I'm not one of these out here that's saying, well, maybe Georgia's just not all that good. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. They're like many other teams. It's a work in progress for them with a new quarterback and a new OC, but they're loaded across the board. And it will take a Herculean effort for South Carolina to, I think, even, make this a fourth quarter game. Just realistically, that being said, I will say, Peyton, I know you didn't bring it up, but we had a question earlier about, what do you think about the spread or whatever, the point spreads at like 27 or 28. Admittedly, that feels like a ton. It does. It feels like a lot, but at the same time, it felt like a lot last year at Willie B, and Georgia won by 41 points. So, I think it's important in a game like this, man. I mean, that Georgia game last year, it didn't define your season, right? It losing to Georgia like that didn't define it. It was an embarrassing day and a horrific result, but it didn't define your season. But I mean, at some point, man, similar to how we said, okay, like, you need to show something against Texas A&M at some point. Like, you need to beat Clemson at some point or have a competitive game with them at some point. Like,
right,
I think South Carolina at some point, man, like, you need to give Georgia a tough game because there's other teams out there that are doing it, right? Like, Missouri took Georgia to the wire last year. Like, Kentucky is always playing a physical game with Georgia. Like, why can't South Carolina get into a second half battle with Georgia where it's like, even if you lose by 14 or even by like 21, but that was a game that at least at halftime, Georgia was sweating a little bit. I mean, last year it's 24-0 at the break, right? So I think that's what this fan base, me included more so, wants to see than anything, is just a Gamecocks football team that, despite the deficiencies, despite the problem areas, is able to go out there and at least give Georgia a ball game through 3 quarters, 2.5 quarters, right? I don't think anybody's asking the world, but at some point you got to just say, I mean, Georgia's never going to go away. You know what I mean? Like, they're never going to be down, at least in the near future. South Carolina's got to step up their game, and, we'll see if they can do that. But at some point, man, you've got to do that to take some steps forward as a program, in my opinion.
I definitely agree with that, man. And I'll say this. Did you say the spread was what was it, plus 27?
It opened, I believe. Well, I'll tell you this. It opened, I believe, at 25.5, and the money immediately poured in on Georgia. The spread, I believe, now is at 27.5. So people think Georgia's going to cover a 25-point spread. We'll put it that way.
Well, I'll say this. I don't think I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think it's necessarily going out on a limb. I think Carolina covers. I'm not expecting another 41-point loss. Just considering the fact of how incredible Georgia looked in the first two games of last season. Georgia just blew everybody off the field. No questions, no nothing. We are here. We're the best team in college football. Come get it. That's what you saw through the first two games last year. You haven't seen that through the first two games of this season. Now, all things considered, last year they opened up with, I think at the time, was it number 10 Oregon? Was their season opener? Or
Yes,
number 9?
Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks. Yes.
Yeah. And they come out and they beat Oregon worse than they beat us. And that's something to be said. And just through two games versus Ball State and UT Martin, they don't look like they did last year. I'll say that. Now, I will say this at the same time. There's a reason that they're ranked number 1 in college football right now. Anybody taking Georgia lightly, just wait till you play Georgia. I'll say that. If you're taking them lightly, just wait till you play them. If you still want to take them lightly after, say if Carolina comes in and they make this a 2-score game, say it's 31-17 final, then you can kind of start taking Georgia lightly, or at least start having some serious questions. But up until this point, you can't take anything away from Georgia. They're still the number 1 team in college football, and we got to treat this game that way. But like you said, having a decent showing, not walking out of there with your ass up behind your ears. So I think this infusion of youth, getting these guys experience. If there's any game that you can prove yourself in, it's against the Georgia Bulldogs, especially if you're a young, hungry freshman looking for more snaps. If you come into this game and you show out and you show your ass, rest assured you will, if not secure a starting position, you will secure yourself a lot of snaps in the future if you come into this game and show out like you're capable of doing. But like you said, I mean, it comes into the coaching staff allowing these freshmen to do it consistently, getting these guys snaps, getting these guys looks, and giving our offense and defense, for that matter, opportunities to win. This is what's getting Dabo Swinney beat, playing the seniority game, juniors and seniors should automatically have playing rights over true freshmen and redshirt sophomores. That's not necessarily true. DJ Uliungalale is a perfect example. The only reason he started the whole season last year was because of seniority. So that's what's getting Clemson beat consistently, and I think that's what's holding us back at the offensive line group, and you seem to agree. So
Indeed, Peyton, a lot of great points, man. I appreciate the call as always. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and we'll see Saturday. We'll see. We shall see. It should be a lot of fun.
That's it, man. It's going to be fun, win, lose, or draw, because it's Carolina football, man. You got to love it. So I'll holler at you more tomorrow. You stay cool out there. Thank you, Spurs Up Show. Go Cox, buddy. I appreciate it.
Peyton, you're the man. Thank you so much. Great stuff from Peyton, as always, guys. Phone lines are open. Continue to hear from you, 843-790-3377. The depth chart has been released for this week's game. How much stock do you really put into it? I don't think the depth chart has changed since week one. I mean, Sidney Fugar is still listed as a starting left tackle. Fugar or Jackson Hughes at right tackle, it says Tyshawn Wanamaker or Ja'Kai Moore. So I don't know how much. I don't know how much really goes into it. Anyways, Coleman Hall chimes in. He says, our O-line couldn't block North Carolina. Georgia's going to be a bloodbath. Cox need to put another O-line lined up as a running back to pick up the blitz. That would be hilarious, actually. Robert Hastings says it's going to be bad, especially if Nick Imawari can't go. Who is going to cover Brock Bowers? Cameron Blasingame, has Rebecca called in yet? No, not yet. Tommy Wallace says, I think we need Nicky Memorial to play about as bad as we need QB1. Bob the Builder says, bro, when is Anderson going to get more playing time? He is a true running back. Austin Gregory, should I call in and give a Luke Day stand rant, my friend? Hey, you are more than welcome to call. Spur Your Enthusiasm says, Sydney can't guard. And listen, if Spur Your Enthusiasm is on your case, you have done something wrong, because Spur Your Enthusiasm, that man, I mean, he is the most optimistic, garnet glasses, to the moon Gamecock out there. So if he's calling you out, something is not going well for you. Ruination says, I say throw these freshmen out there that we're hoping to step up this year and tell them, go get your experience and learn in this game. This is going to be your toughest task. Go see what you can do. I mean, Ruination, I tend to agree with you, honestly. I tend to agree with you. I think it's, why not? As Peyton said, baptism by fire. Austin Gregory says Mike Bobo and Muscrap are getting taken to the woodshed this Saturday in Athens. USC Edit says Georgia's DBs may handle that better, but hey, in 2021, Georgia's secondary looked bad versus us. We'll see. USC Edit says, definitely think Rattler throws his first pick this weekend. He'll be just under too much pressure and at some point will force a throw. I think that's a safe bet. I do. If I tell you this, if you told me right now Spencer Rattler comes out of this weekend with no interceptions thrown, I'd tell you South Carolina had a pretty decent game. I think that'd be a good start at least. I'm not saying it guarantee it'd be perfect or anything, but Tommy Wallace, when are we going to see DK throw a halfback pass? Surely coaches have it in the playbook. If not, bad coaching. I'm sure they have it in there, Tommy, but it's one of those things. You got to pick and choose your spots, right? So I just don't think they've used it yet. Zach Hardy, if we beat Georgia, where do you see us being ranked? I think South Carolina would jump into the top 20. I think that's fair. Austin Gregory says he'll be in Athens this weekend. How many of you are going to Athens? That'll be fun. Andrew the textbook says over under 5 sacks for Rattler this weekend. My goodness. I mean, it's not a ridiculous statement. South Carolina's offensive line, they were much better against Furman, didn't allow a sack, but I mean, after giving up 9 to North Carolina, I don't know. Lynn Turner with a good point here. You have to be careful breaking the confidence of freshmen by throwing him into the fire too soon. UGA might not be the best place for a first start. I mean, Lynn, that is a good point. We talk about it a lot with the quarterback position, right? And not like you mentioned, breaking their confidence too early. I think you can say the same about offensive line, every position, right? So you do make a good point that, maybe it's not the best thing, but I don't know. I think those freshmen, Lynn, I think they have to play. I mean, because call it for what it is. I mean, Sidney Fugar and Tyshawn Wanamaker and those, they look bad against Furman. Right? I mean, they look bad against Furman. So what do you expect against Georgia? Like, do we think Sidney Fugar has any chance to block Georgia on the edge? Like, do we actually think that? There's no way. Guys, let me highlight these for you really quickly because it's going to be a busy week for yours truly and content bleeding out of the eyeballs for you all. So let's go down the list. Of course, you already know these. These are weekly. Today at 4:40, we'll talk with our good friend Mark Ryan at the Fan Upstate. And Thursday at 11:30, inside the Gamecocks, we'll talk with JC, JB, and Phil. Immediately following TDC today at 3 o'clock, I'm jumping on with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, our good friend, to break down the Gamecocks and Georgia. Also, at some point, I'm not exactly sure the date, but at some point, talk with our good friend, A Damn Beast Media. He is a Georgia podcast. We'll be chatting with him. On Wednesday night, we're going to be chatting with Nothing Finer Pod, which is another Georgia podcast. And then on Thursday, I'm actually doing a Twitter Spaces with our good friend Jeremy on Twitter, on X, I should say, excuse me, doing a roundtable discussion, myself and Graham Coffee, who is the co-founder and publisher of DogsCentral.com. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't add another show or two appearance. So going to be a fun week, guys. A lot of content bleeding out of the eyeballs. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into one final break. On the other side, I want to continue to hear from you. More of your questions, comments, calls, and more. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Monday, final 10 minutes or so, taking your questions, your comments, your calls at 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. I know I say it a lot, but I mean it because I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you. I wake up so excited to get after it, to talk ball with you all and talk Gamecocks, talk SEC, all that good stuff. And you know, you always kind of wonder how new content will be received. Obviously, this is a Gamecock show. I'm a Gamecock entity, and I'm a Gamecock fan. But as you all know, we've been leaning a lot more into SEC stuff as a whole and talking SEC football. And, you know, I feel like that's been something that's been received very positively. So I want to say thank y'all, man. It means the world that y'all rock with us to that degree. And, you know, I just cannot say thank you enough. Also, guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in to the TSUS post-game call-in show and making that a massive success to this point. It's been a blast, been a lot of fun. I'm sure that, you know, I'm sure that Saturday will be more of the same after the Gamecocks game against Georgia. And, you know, it's going to be fun either way, man. Win, lose, or draw. The A1 Air Quality Consultants post-game call-in show. Also, guys, the reception and the feedback from the changes to our online store. In case you missed it, obviously we have gone away from our previous vendor and gone back to the TSUS store that you all know and love, with so many of our products returning. It's been awesome, man. I cannot say thank you all enough. Also, I will be adding some new products. I know there's some things that were listed on the the store previously that we do not have now. For example, the Clem Sucks foam trucker hats, the camo beamer ball hats. I'm going to look into adding some of those things. And if you guys have any other ideas, suggestions, what have you, please be sure to shoot those over to us. Again, guys, it is Georgia week. Carolina and Georgia, always a fun week. And of course, SEC play gets underway, and we're going to start to really learn some things about really going to learn some things about this South Carolina football team and just kind of where they stack up with one of the elites in college football. Brewer Nation says, what time is Jake on Friday? He owes me some respect. What is Brewer Nation? What does he owe you some respect for? He's on at 1:15, though. 1:15 every Friday. 1:15 every single Friday. Let's see. Spur Your Enthusiasm says, Bobo and Muschamp are a poison. R.I.P. Georgia. I hear you, man. I hear you. Dude Raw for show says, now was a great time to sell that all my homies hate Mike Bobo merch. I love it, man. You are right. You are right. Spur Your Enthusiasm says, we have a legitimate shot at exposing the UGA passing game if they don't lean on the run. P.S. Bobo and Muschamp suck. Cox by 90. F them, win anyways. That's going to be a huge key for sure. That's going to be a huge storyline, is just Carson Beck against an SEC defense and his first real test in the ball game. So I guess the Braves are playing right now because John Edwards says 7-4 Atlanta home run by Michael Harris. Okay. I did not know they were playing at this very moment. Oh, yes, Brewer Nation, the Colorado-Nebraska predictions. Bro, anybody who's putting any money at all on Marcus Satterfield, you deserve what's coming to you. I'll just leave it at that. You deserve what's coming to you. So, guys, do not forget, by the way, do not forget to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so you get notifications of when we drop new video content as well. Also, listen to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts as well. Wherever you get your podcasts, hit the subscribe button there also, guys. I apologize, a little bit distracted because Shane Beamer just tweeted at Big Game Boomer. Like, dude, for anybody out there who thinks Shane Beamer is not paying attention to every single tweet, every piece of content, he is. Because he just quote tweeted Big Game Boomer, who listed his top 20 best and worst student sections of the week, what have you. Coach Beamer said this, I love you, Big Game Boomer, but I'm starting to think you don't watch any of our games anymore. The at SC Cockpit, the student section, was absolutely packed and rocking on Saturday. So Shane Beamer taking his shot at Big Game Boomer for not listing the student section as one of the best of the weekend. You know, y'all tell me. Admittedly, I from what I was told, again, I was not there in person. From what I was told, I heard that some were disappointed in the student section for leaving early. Is that true? Is it not? Guys, here's a fun fact for you, by the way, in honor of Tennessee, Florida this weekend. Tennessee has only won twice in the Swamp over the last 51 seasons since 1971. The Vols' last win in Gainesville came in 2003. That's crazy. That's crazy. Austin Gregory says, Chris, I know you know how this week feels here in the CSRA. It's a big one. I mean, like I said, Austin, I literally grew up hating Georgia far more than I hated Clemson, just because of the people you dealt with. And, yeah. Yep, just because of that. It's tough. I trust me, I empathize with you. If you're in the CSRA this week, I truly do empathize with you. So Lance Player says, 5-7 Jake. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Lance. Early in that game, and it was 14-7 Furman, I think a lot of us were saying, man, 5-7 Jake was on to something. Like 5-7 Jake was on to something, because boy, oh boy, did we look terrible. So thankfully, that got corrected rather quickly. So let's see. Yeah, Andrew the textbook. Last year, the Border Bash. For those who are familiar that live in the CSRA, yeah, for sure. That's the Border Bash is always something. I didn't really go to that when I lived there, Andrew the textbook. I went 1 year, but it's an event dominated by Georgia fans. It is, which you're going to expect. It's in Augusta. And that was one of the reasons why we stopped going to Augusta when we did our Carolina Ale House tour. We were still doing those because Augusta is just so Georgia heavy. But what's weird is, like, I think there are a lot of Gamecock fans in that area, but it's just like the Gamecock fans are like in hiding being down there. I know Austin Gregory's on record for sure being one, and shout out to you for holding it down, but I don't know, man. It feels like almost few and far in between for for Gamecock fans. Let's shut up the phone lines here.
Call from
King.
What's going on, man? How are you?
What's up, man? How you feeling?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you asking. What's going on?
Not much, man. I was just over here thinking, do you think that we kind of held back our playbook these first two games and we'll really open it up more against Georgia?
Well, in theory, I hear what you're saying, but if we held anything back against UNC, I think that was a mistake. I mean, that's a game you would have liked to have won. You would have won, and I mean, holding something back in that game, a pivotal game, season opener. Is there a chance? Maybe, because I think your playbook expands, obviously, as some guys get, more experience under their belt, granted, for what it is. And I think you're able to open up and do some different things. But, I don't know how much they've held back. I don't know that I can really speak to it, man. But I'd be surprised it was a ton, just because you would have preferred to been 2-0 right now. You know what I mean? You would have preferred to been 2-0. So
right.
But I'm sure they're going to have some tricks up their sleeve. I mean, listen, South Carolina's a 4-touchdown underdog. Georgia's got all the pressure on them. Why not throw some things out there that maybe you have not done, to this point? So,
right. And then I agree. Do you think Eddie Lewis over Luke Doty next week, or would you rather? I mean, both of them will play, but
yeah,
as far as more plays, would you pick Eddie Lewis over Doty, or how you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I like Eddie Lewis a lot. I thought that was a great game by him against Furman. Racked him, I think it was 6 catches. So Luke Doty continues to surprise me a little bit. He can make some plays out there, receiver, but realistically, yeah, I would put Eddie Lewis over Luke Doty. But I mean, just put the best ones out there. That's really, I think, all we're asking at this point. But both can help you win. I think expect both to play in Athens as well.
Right. All right, man. I was just asking those questions, man. Have a good one.
Hey, man, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Great stuff, and that's a great way, guys, to close out the show. Again, guys, like I mentioned, we're jumping on with Mark Rogers right now, so I'm going to go ahead and close things out. Again, guys, be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we drop new video content, when we go live as well. Also, of course, guys, the podcast drops daily every single day, 5 p.m. Eastern, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Check us out there. Hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review also as well. Tell us what you like about the show, don't like. We appreciate all of the feedback. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a great rest of your Monday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.